Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. Let me get this volume right. There we are. Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right. Yes, I am still fighting this physical infirmity. That's okay. It'll pass. Hopefully by next week, it will be resolved. I hope you guys are doing all right, though. Shout out to the chat, everybody that is here this bright and early Friday morning. I'm sorry for being late. I was trying to get a guest on at the last minute. I was pushing hard to get Ritter back on the show. I was also pushing hard to get Professor Wolf on the show. Apparently, he had a meeting that is going to take place at 10:30, and so he wasn't necessarily able to come on at the time that I wanted him to. Nevertheless, I will have him on the show, if not today, next week. And same thing with Ritter. There is a lot to talk about with Ritter. So I would be super interested to have a conversation with him, especially on the issue of Iran. Nevertheless, a lot is taking place in the news, and we are going to do the news. For one, Yoon Suk Yeol, South Korean president, has been impeached. The court has approved it. He is no longer president of South Korea. He has been removed. The people were effectively dancing in the streets. To show you a clip of this, this is pretty amazing. Now, when we were talking to KJ was worried that there was going to be a civil. Well, that's pretty loud. KJ was worried if he wasn't impeached. Thankfully, he was. And just for the people who may not have been paying attention to this was the guy that decided to declare martial law out of the blue, like on a random Tuesday or something. Just, we have martial law at like 11 o'clock at night. Had his military to try to block Congress members or parliamentary members from getting back into parliament in order to vote it down. He even had orders to effectively disappear elements of the opposition. And the belief that KJ was going with is that the United States didn't necessarily trust South Korea under the model to which they were operating with and would prefer it as a dictatorship. This goes to the idea of North Korean troops in Ukraine believing that under the guise of North Korean troops in Ukraine, that the US would somehow get South Korea to send troops into Ukraine in order to help the Ukrainians. This stuff was outlandish, even to the point of potentially killing his political opposition. All of this stuff was clear cut. It was an open and shut case, and yet it took all of this time for them to finally come down and say, yes, this was deeply illegal, deeply unconstitutional, and he will be removed. So he is no longer president of South Korea. Hopefully he will be having a jail cell, if not an execution. And yes, I mean execution. I'm not a dove on this stuff. You put these people in positions of authority, you give them immense power in regards to what they can do in a constitutional system. And if they decide that they're going to abuse it, and not just abuse it, potentially kill the political opposition, then I don't care what happens to you after that. Zero feelings. Zero feelings. Whatever they do to him, it's fair game. It is outrageous that that guy would even try something like that. And if indeed he was pushed by the United States, that makes it even worse. Makes it even worse. From my understanding, the South Korean military would be under the auspices of the United States if indeed there was some kind of war. Also, there was the point of him trying to provoke a war with North Korea. Like, all of this stuff was outrageous. And so this was an open and shut case. It should not have taken them this long for them to go through with this. Apparently, there was pressure coming from the United States to not have him prosecuted. God bless the South Koreans. God bless the South Koreans. The other big issue, of course, are the tariffs. The market has been just selling itself off. China, as I really assumed, was not going to take any lesson from the United States on this, and they come out and put a 34% tariff on all imported products from the United States starting April 10th. That's called a trade war. That's called a trade war. Now, there have been some ridiculous comments coming out of the White House. And some are more honest, actually. Vance has been more honest about it. So right here, this is Vance. Vance is effectively saying, look, you're just going to have to pay more for stuff. Suck it up.
You're going to have more money in your pocket. You're going to have more money in your pocket, and that's of course going to help you deal with the cost of inflation. You're going to have more money in your pocket, and that's of course going to help you deal with the cost of inflation.
But you're not going to have more money in your pocket. Where are you getting the more money in your pocket from? Where are you getting this from? You're not getting a raise. Nobody's giving you additional money. In fact, more to the point, when you go to the store, your products are going to be more expensive. Even if the thought is to buy American, do you honestly believe that American vendors are going to inflate their prices because they believe they can make more money now that other products are more expensive? Some of the rhetoric that has been coming out of the Trump administration has been completely laughable. In fact, the tariffs weren't related to actual tariffs from other countries in the way that Donald Trump is saying. Trump is trying to make this argument that, oh, these are tariffs from other countries and we're compensating. No. Trump is looking at the amount of exports that we send to other countries divided by the trade imbalance. So think of it like, in fact, I'll give you a good example. It's ludicrous what he is doing. So right here, just figured out where these fake tariff rates come from. They didn't actually calculate tariff rates plus non-tariff barriers, as they said they did. Instead, for every country, they took our trade deficit with that country and divided it by the country's exports to us. So if we have let's say 17.9 billion trade deficit from Indonesia, it exports to the US 28 billion. So that deficit divided by exports to the US, and that is the number that Trump effectively came up with. And they did this across the board. And so that's how you ended up with the trade numbers. And then in other cases, he just said 10% across the board. It's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. Like, there is no economic rationale to any of this. This is economic idiocy. And yes, the EU is going to push back. China is going to push back. China, Japan, and South Korea has already said they're working together in regards to coming up with a way of pushing back on the United States, which is right there pretty astonishing. The relationship between China, South Korea, and Japan are fraught with difficulties, especially South Korea and Japan. The idea that they're working together is mind-blowing. And yet, you are getting ridiculousness coming out of the White House. For example, this is Lutnick. This is Lutnick. Listen to what he's saying here. Listen to what he's saying here. This guy is a goofball. And I just think all of these people in Trump administration are as dumb as this stupid idiot.
I mean, the European Union won't take chicken from America. They won't take lobsters from America. They hate our beef because our beef is beautiful and theirs is weak. I mean, the European...
They won't take our beef because our beef is beautiful. That's what he just said. They won't take our beef because our beef is beautiful. The reason that they don't take our beef, chicken, is because we fill the shit with antibiotics and all sorts of chemicals and hormones that they don't want their citizens eating. Meaning when you're in Europe and you're eating their beef or their chicken, you can be assured that the shit that they put in that stuff in America is not in those products. There's a reason why Europeans live longer. I suspect that part of it has to do with the shit that they don't put in their foods as opposed to what we do put in their foods. If he is thinking that, well, we could put a huge amount of tariffs on Europe to force their people to eat crappy food, I think you're out of your mind. I think you're out of your mind. There's a reason. The European Union has regulations in regards to what they allow versus what they don't allow. And there are products that we allow in Americans' foods. We fill our chicken with hormones. We fill our chicken with antibiotics. We fill our beef with these hormones and antibiotics and everything else in the way that we process our meats. They don't allow their citizens to eat that nonsense. We do. We do. It's probably why we're sicker and we die younger. At least one of the reasons. He's incompetent. And yet, he is the guy that is out here trying to sell this message for Donald Trump that this is perfectly awesome, that the markets are collapsing, and that Donald Trump has decided to have a trade war against the world. It is outrageous. I'm mind blown by this. And they asked Trump, how's your 401k doing? Now they're asking him this because they know that the market is just collapsing, completely collapsing. And they know that this is going to be painful to Americans. Trump doesn't seem to all that much care. Right here.
Got to give it a little chance, but we're taking in jobs and we're taking in industry, we're taking in trillions of dollars. I think our markets are going to boom. Got to give it a little bit of time, but they've already started construction on numerous plants. Soon it'll be many, many plants all over the country. They're going, and so you got to give that a little time. I haven't checked my 401. Thank you very much.
Sir, what was
we have a very good dialogue.
To be clear, layoffs have already started. You've had several companies already come out laying off employees as a direct result of what Donald Trump is doing because of the consequence of it. Our prices are going to go up. Trump is trying to make this argument that we're going to give a tax cut. Okay, yeah, but the tax cut is going to go to the richest predominantly, with us paying for the cost of all of these tariffs. This is outrageous that they're doing this. Nobody asked for this. Nobody voted for this, etc. And yet, this is what they're running with, and this is what they're effectively trying to sell to the American public as if it is some kind of great thing. I would tell you another thing. Donald Trump is so inconsistent that it's not the case that businesses are going to spend money on the whim, knowing full well that Donald Trump tomorrow can change his mind. He can come up with something other new payment plan, meaning their money is going to be held in reserve, not knowing what Trump is going to do. Also, it doesn't make sense for a company to transport itself into America when it takes years to do so, when this could be over with in a few years. I hope you get my point. It doesn't make sense. It's so scatterbrained that the effects that he wants to have of industries coming back to America, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It's nonsense. In fact, there was a businessman, I don't know if I have the clip up, but he was going into talking about how he started businesses where he wanted to effectively use American products and American labor. And what he found was that there were many things that he couldn't get in America, that we didn't have the infrastructure for, or that we didn't have the technological capability to produce, whereas in China, they did. And so he would go to China and say, I need this particular product. They say, okay, we can build this product. And he goes to America and says, well, that's too complicated for us to build. In which case, his point was, there's some things you just can't get here, that we can't build. We don't have the infrastructure to build. We deindustrialize ourselves to the point where many of the products that you would need are abroad. This is going to fail magnificently. Mark is going to come on and make a different argument. I think Mark is wrong. I think Mark is extremely wrong. Mark looks at this from the position that this is an attack on BRICS, that this is a way of trying to get BRICS countries to renegotiate with the United States as opposed to working with BRICS. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think that's going to work if that is the case. None of these countries trust the United States. And so whatever they tell him, whatever they come up with, it's not going to be one of those things that undermines BRICS at all. If anything, it's going to incentivize those countries to move away from the US. No country wants to be dictated to in these terms. And again, this is not about a trade barrier issue. One other thing, Smith-Hartley Act. We've done this before. We've done this before. And we did this during the Great Depression with the idea that we're going to protect ourselves from foreign countries and their markets during the Great Depression. This failed magnificently. And not just failed magnificently, the belief is that it made the Great Depression that much worse. Now, to put this in context, Trump's tariffs are worse by order of magnitude than what they did during the Smith-Hartley Act that made the Great Depression worse. This is a self-inflicted wound. And mark my words, Republicans will pay for it. They will pay for it. I think they will. I could be wrong, but I think they will pay for it. Trump's approval rating is already slipping right here. And that approval rating is slipping for obvious reasons. He's failed on the international front to get anything accomplished. Right here. President Trump's approval rating slipped to the lowest point during his second presidential term amid the handling of the economy, the Houthi signal chat leak, according to the survey published on Wednesday. The new Reuters Ipsos poll found the president's approval rating was 43%, representing a 2-point drop since March. In 1 month since Trump took office. When he started, his approval rating was at 47%, the highest that it had been for Donald Trump. This would only get worse. It would only get worse. Now, part of the issue is that Donald Trump has no foreign policy accomplishments. He came in office saying, I'm going to solve the war in 24 hours. Okay, well, it's been a couple of months. No progress. You can say, yeah, talk to Putin. That's fine. But Donald Trump seems to be in a hurry to get something accomplished on the front in regards to Ukraine. He said he wasn't going to start new wars, and yet he's bombing Yemen. The signal leak, I don't care too much about, even though, yeah, it's egregious. I mean, I think it's more egregious than what's in that leak, where they're celebrating knocking down an apartment complex to get one guy. Think about that. You're looking for one person. You may have an apartment full of people, and you blow up the entire apartment building, believing that whoever's in that apartment building, kids, women, old people, fair game. Now, if Hamas blew up an apartment building to get 2 Israelis, will we be okay with that? Well, no, they would complain, oh my God, I can't believe they did this. This is terrorism. But it's okay when we do it. Absolute nonsense. I want to move to another story. Cory Booker. Cory Booker just gave. Okay, let me move. So this Smith-Hartley, I think, just to show what I was talking about. This is Fortune magazine. The economists are freaking out over this, by the way. How the Trump tariffs compared to Smith-Hartley. So it says in June 1930, just 8 months after the historic stock market crash that started the Great Depression, Congress enacted the Smoot-Hartley tariff law, championed by Reed Smoot and Representative Willis Hartley. The nation had already turned towards protectionism, chiefly to protect farmers and industrial workers 8 years earlier. Blah, blah, blah. Let's keep going. So right here. The new law designed to double down on shielding agricultural workers and folks toiling with the likes of steel and auto plants raised imposed duties over 50% on many products. Still, around 2/3 of U.S. imports remain tariff-free, so the average rate rose much less, 6.3 points, just under 20%. What they're saying is they weren't doing it across the board. There were certain industries that they were trying to protect, but for the most part, the market stayed open. That's slightly below the 22, 23% I give for Trump's plan. That's stunning in and of itself. But the most astounding takeaway is that Trump's blueprint will raise today's tariffs from the current 3% by nearly 20 points, or sevenfold, 3 times more than the Smoot-Hawley Act. In the 3 years following the enactment of the Smoot-Hawley Act, U.S. imports dropped by 2/3 and pounded by stiff retaliation from nations such as Germany, the UK, Canada. Our sales abroad fell by like a percentage. According to most economists, the Trump tariffs are likely to unleash a sharp decline in both what we buy from foreigners and what producers sell abroad in the years to come. And if shrinkage in our global trading activity proves even a fraction as disastrous of collapse post-Smoot-Hawley, it is bad news. The Nonpartisan Tax Foundation, posted before Trump announcement on April 2nd, reckoned that the new duties would curb GDP growth by 0.4% a year in the long term. That shaves a quarter off the 2% less expansion Congressional Budget Office projects in the year ahead. Effectively, our economy is going to take a hit. And our economy is going to take a hit because other countries are not necessarily going to accept the fact that we are pulling this nonsense. And as bad as the outcome of the Smoot-Hawley Act was, Trump's tariffs are sevenfold over what the act was doing. We've done this before. This is not magic. We've done this before. I want to go to Cory Booker. Cory Booker has just given a 24-hour, 20-minute speech in the Senate. It is not a filibuster. It's not a filibuster because there was no bill or legislation up for them to impede. He was just up there performing. It was like a concert. This is a little bit of what Cory Booker was saying, just so you would hear it. I mean, it was effectively a 24-hour diatribe against Donald Trump. It was the longest diatribe in congressional history. He beat Strom Thurmond. Okay, fair enough. But again, purely theatrical. No political value. There wasn't any legislation. There wasn't anything he was trying to impede. He was just running his mouth for 24.
To remove great people, and now it's our generation. We have to redeem the dream. We have to excite people again. He, in the highest office of our land, wants to divide us against ourselves, wants to make us afraid, wants to make us fear so much that we're willing to violate people's fundamental rights. We're willing to go after the speech on college campuses. We're willing to go after law firms, go after the freedom of the press. Don't let him do that. Don't become like him. Be an American that says, I look to the future and I'm excited. Yes, things are tough right now. They're hard, they're scary, they're hurting, but we can overcome this. Our American history, if it's nothing else, American history, if it's nothing else, it is a perpetual testimony to the achievement of impossible things against impossible odds. We are a nation that is great, not because of the people that are trying to whitewash our history. To remove great people, Native Americans, Black people, and women from our military websites. I don't want a Disneyfication of our history. I don't want to whitewash history. I don't want to homogenize history. Tell me the wretched truth about America, because that speaks to our greatness. And so what do I want people to do? It starts with us, man, and you're doing it. I've seen courage of my colleagues. We're doing it, but we have to do more, and I'm sorry. I'm not going to be a politician that's going to say, we are going to do more for you. I'm going to be a politician. I'm going to be a leader that demands more from America.
Senator, you for one last question.
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Well,
Performative bullshit. Performative bullshit. Again, it's not a filibuster. There was no legislation on the floor. there was nothing that Cory Booker was impeding with that 24-hour diatribe. He was just out there going after Trump, which is fine. What he said wasn't entirely false. I would point out, though, that Joe Biden was also going after those campuses. He had zero issue doing so. And to make it even worse, Nina Jankowicz, under Joe Biden was trying to create a ministry of truth with a censorship regime in order to eliminate points of view that he didn't particularly like on the issues of the war or issues of his own policy. Hunter Biden laptop being another good example of that. And to make it even worse, I got fired under Joe Biden. Because again, it wasn't that I was saying anything false. They just didn't like the fact that I was saying it at all. So don't give me this nonsense about, oh, Trump is for censorship. You guys are just for different types of censorship. Let's get that straight. Also, I would like to point out, Bernie Sanders put out a bill in order to stop the funding of Israel to the tune of $8.8 billion in weapons. 15 senators voted to cancel billions in Israeli aid. This bill obviously didn't pass. Cory Booker voted for the money to go to Israel, obviously, because Cory Booker has gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, from Israel. Cory Booker is standing here after that speech with a war criminal, Gallant. That's Booker standing with somebody who has an ICC arrest warrant hanging over his head, arm in arm, buddy. Cory Booker approves of this. The same guy who's giving us approves of it. Cory Booker approves of this. Shall I keep going? Cory Booker approves of this. These are the things that Cory Booker approves of. Don't give me this shit, this performative nonsense. If you can't stand up against what is obviously a genocide, then I don't really give a shit what else you have to say to me. All of this performative stuff is nice. I don't want the Disney version of American history. Okay, well, what about current reality that we're in now, where you are sending billions of dollars to a government that is slaughtering the population, and you are standing arm in arm with a war criminal after you give this nonsense 24-hour performative theater? Yeah, that same Cory Booker. Cory Booker is perfectly okay with people being slaughtered and murdered en masse. Cory Booker will go out and vote for that slaughter and murder of those people en masse. I don't care if Cory Booker stands up and gives a performative theatrical speech going after Donald Trump. Is Donald Trump grotesque? Yes. Is Cory Booker grotesque for backing a genocide? Yes. Also, yes. Him and Donald Trump have the exact same position on the issue of Gaza, or for that matter, the issue of the Middle East. Cory Booker will bend over and lick the nuts of Netanyahu if they tell him to do so. That is how in the pan Cory Booker is. I wouldn't be shocked if in this he was fondling Gallant's testicles just because Gallant asked him to do so, just to see if he would do it. Cory, I need you to lick my ass. You really need me to do it? Yes, Cory, I paid you money to do it. Do it, Cory. Do it. Lick my ass. And I would imagine there's an image somewhere of Cory Booker licking Gallant's ass. Wouldn't be shocked. Wouldn't be shocked in the least. And yes, he would do it. He would do it That's how in the tank for Israel, for the Zionist lobby that Cory Booker is. He is full of shit. I don't give a shit about his theatrical performances. What I care about is the fact that he is backing fully a genocide, just like the rest of the Democratic Party. Tanisha Coates, he came out with a post, and what he pointed out was, he says, is it really any wonder that the Democratic Party seemed to have no resistance to Donald Trump when they really had no resistance to a genocide either? I think Tanisha Coates is right. I think he's completely right. So yeah, Cory Booker is full of shit. I don't care about his theatrical performance. I don't care about him doing a diatribe for 24 hours. I don't care. It's not a filibuster. He's not doing anything to prevent anything from taking place. It is worthless theater. Worthless theater. There's some goofballs on Twitter who's like, oh my God, Cory Booker is standing up for America. Shut up. He's not. I'm sorry, he's not. He's not. He's not doing anything for you. He's not doing anything for me. He's not doing anything for America. The Democratic Party is in a position where people are very angry at the party because they believe that the party isn't doing shit for them and believes that they need to be stronger on the issue of standing up against Trump. Okay, so if you have no political power, if you have no substance in regards to things that you actually believe in and stand up for, if somebody said, what does the Democratic Party stand for? Nobody would know. Nobody could give an answer to that in earnest. So what do? What do you have? Performance. You dance. You dance. You move. You dance. You gyrate. You try to make people think that something is actually taking place when in reality nothing is taking place. And the few lemmings that you have on social media or what else, they say, oh my God, Cory Booker stood up for 24 hours and 20 minutes. Oh my God, he's standing up for America. That's amazing. They're not in the know. It's performative. It's theater. It's designed purely to give a look as if something is happening because there's a lot of energy and movement around, and Cory Booker is flailing around. But to what end? What was accomplished? In real world, physical matter, reality terms, what was accomplished? Short of Cory Booker dehydrating himself and holding his bladder for a very long time. It was nonsensical. Sure, it might have been entertaining for a bit, but what was the value? There wasn't. Again, it wasn't even holding up a piece of legislation. It was just Cory Booker taken to the floor to mouth off against Trump for 24 hours and 20 minutes. Completely worthless, pointless theater. That's what it was. Just like God, man, they're worthless. That political party is worthless. And if they end up in a permanent minority position, they have fundamentally earned it. Now, the key catch here is they may actually win in the midterms, not for anything that they're doing, but for how bad Donald Trump is. Understand what Donald Trump, he wants at the same time, a grotesque tax cut. So he wants that. He wants that at the exact same time that they've been destroying Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, laying off tens of thousands of workers. And on top of that, has initiated a trade war with the rest of the world. So not only have you put markets in free fall and put all of this question marks or uncertainty around US policy in regards to trade and in regards to other countries, but you're also now trying to get a grotesque tax cut on top of that that will go to the top 1% more than anybody else, meaning you have put a lot of balls in the air simultaneously. And some of those are not being perceived well by the American public. Again, the firing of workers is not perceived well by the American public. The destruction of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, not perceived well by the American public. The grotesque tax cuts that most likely will come down will most likely not be perceived well by the American public. The increased costs that Americans are going to have to pay are not going to be perceived well by the American public. None of these things are positive. None of these things are what people necessarily voted for. All of these things is what Trump is delivering. All of these things are what Trump's delivering. One last point on a separate topic. Negotiations. If you've noticed, the Trump administration has become very desperate on the issue of trying to get negotiations with Russia. Now, in the desperation of them trying to get negotiations with Russia, there's been a report that has come out. Well, I guess there are two things. One, Trump's envoy came to the US. Now, this envoy, where is it? So right here. This is what he reported, that Russia and the US are effectively trying to restore relations. Now, Putin's envoy in this case, Carrillo, Dmitriev, I believe the name is, he is something like an investment person for Russia. He says this in response to, well, basically taking questions.
Here with the key officials in the Trump administration, one of the key topics was restoring relations between Russia and America, restoring the dialogue that was stopped during the Biden administration and by the Biden administration. We see that a lot of actors from different countries are trying to undermine, to thwart this dialogue, the restoring of Russia-US relations. They're trying to prevent us from addressing and resolving the issues that must be solved.
He is right. There are many countries that are trying to avoid or at the very least undercut negotiations that are taking place. But Trump and his team seems to be under a lot of pressure to get something going in regards to negotiations. But bumbling Trump is not necessarily doing this all that well. And to make it even worse, his team is effectively saying, we don't want another call between Donald Trump and Putin until the Kremlin agrees for a ceasefire. This is nonsense. I'm telling you right off the bat, this is nonsense, right? For one, the deal that they came up with the first time around, meaning the 30-day ceasefire, Ukraine hasn't honored it at all. And not just Ukraine hasn't honored that deal, they have been violating it almost as an FU to Trump for even going with the deal in the first place. The Trump administration hasn't said anything about it, hasn't had any condemnation of the fact that they've been violating the deal. So why on earth would Russia accept a ceasefire without any preconditions to the ceasefire? You haven't been living up to the last ceasefire. Why would they accept a ceasefire? Now, understand, from the Russian point of view, we're winning on the battlefield. The Ukraine military will collapse in a few months at some point. Why would we stop? We're getting everything that we want. We are completing the mission and objective of the special military operation. That is what we're going to do. We're going to keep moving up until the point where the Ukrainian military collapses, even if that means we need to go to Kiev. Now, we don't want to take West Ukraine, but we will if we have to. Now, the key point to all of this is they're open for negotiations. The catch is, are they going to get what they want? If Trump gives them what they want, fair enough. We can have these talks. And Putin's main condition is, if we have a ceasefire, you cannot give them additional weapons. And on top of not giving them additional weapons, you need to stop giving them intelligence, stop giving them support, and maybe we can come to some kind of terms, in which case we call it a day. If you're not going to do that, then what's the point in us agreeing to a ceasefire? The thought that we accept a ceasefire and you load Ukraine with weapons, intelligence, money, etc., is nonsense. It's a non-starter. If Trump's team doesn't know that and doesn't understand that, the negotiations are going to go nowhere. There is nothing that the U.S. can do from the battlefield to change the context of events. Zero. If you want to go to nuclear war, fair enough. But short of you going to nuclear war, there is nothing that you can do. It's not an issue of tariffs. It's not an issue of any of that stuff that is going to change any of that stuff. Russia's been sanctioned to the hilt. You've even taken them off the SWIFT system. You've shot your load. So the catch becomes, if this team really is on this point of view that we don't want to have another conversation conversation with Putin until they accept the ceasefire, then I guess you won't be having another conversation with Putin at all. All of this completely repudiates everything Donald Trump was saying on the campaign trail. And all of this means that fundamentally, in a foreign policy sense, Trump is failing miserably. He has no wins on an international standpoint. He is bombing Yemen. He's gone back on his word in regards to the issue of Israel in Gaza, meaning he's repudiated that deal. He knew Israel completely violated that deal. He didn't do anything about it. In fact, he gave Israel a pass as they violated the deal. And in the ceasefire with Ukraine, he's doing the exact same thing. Russia already doesn't trust you. Why would they trust you after you've entirely violated your own deals in multiple occasions, not to mention the JCPOA, where you've effectively blown off? I hope you get my point. Trump is not a trustworthy actor under any circumstances. So why would Russia or any other country trust Trump for anything? And they've made it very clear. You get nothing from us unless we get something from you. And we are no longer playing this game where we trust anybody in the West for anything. That is doubly so for Trump. This is a poor article. And I don't mean poor article in the sense that it was poorly written. Parts of it is. I'm pointing out that if what his team is telling Trump, and if Trump is actually accepting what his team is saying, then nothing is going to take place on the issue of negotiations. Negotiations have fundamentally stalled. I would say that this gentleman here, he makes a point. He doesn't bring up the war. He just says restore diplomatic ties. He says nothing about ending the war. That's fascinating. I want to go to my guest, though. I am joined with, if I can pull this up. There we are. I'm joined with the man himself, good friend of this show, Mark Frost. Mark Frost is an economist, professor, consultant, drummer, Eagle Scout, Marine capitalist, Marine Schumpeterian, recovering libertarian. Mark, I know that by heart. How you doing, my man? You doing okay this morning? I didn't even look at the way. I pulled it up and didn't even look at it. How you doing? You doing okay this
Always
morning?
good to be on your show, man. You know I love you, and it's,
Oh, man,
life
it's
is
always good to
good.
have you.
Weather's good. It's not so cold anymore. The squirrels are running all over the place. I'm in the drum room this morning. Cats are harassing me, so life is good.
Well, you know who's very angry? Penguins. Because
Lots of
apparently
people, yeah.
Trump has sanctioned or has put tariffs on penguin
Yeah.
island.
Yeah.
There are no people there. They're just penguins there.
Yeah.
And those penguins have been chirping away, very angry, very upset at these tariffs. You and I are going to have a very different opinion on this. Very different opinion.
Maybe not as big, maybe not as different as you think. That often happens with us. It's
Fair enough. That is true.
Usually
That
we
is true.
disagree on the tactics, not or the grand strategy, not so much the actual what's happening, because facts are facts.
Facts are facts.
It's silly to debate facts. I can't stand that. I mean, 2 + 2 = 4. No debate.
Fair enough. I accept that. Let me ask you this. I've seen some reporting, I think it was the Tax Foundation, that pointed out that people are going to effectively have to pay a tax of $2,100 each as a result of the sanctions that Donald Trump has effectively waged against the world. Do you agree with that? Disagree with that?
Most economic topics aren't conducive to sound bites, so I both agree and I disagree. With it at the same time, because you have a short run impact and you have a long run impact. Whether Trump is going to be successful or not, I'll leave that to the soothsayers, to the political scientists, and that sort of a thing. But here's what he's trying to do. And I sent you something that earlier today that a client of mine who does a lot of international commerce, he literally asked me, he goes, "Hey, could you write something short, nothing fancy? I have to talk to my board, and I want to understand what this tariff thing is going on and why it's important and what exactly is going on." So I sent you almost exactly what I sent him, with just personally identifiable information taken out. And so what Trump is trying to do and again, whether he's successful or not, only time will tell that. What he's trying to do is to conquer probably the fundamental problem of a representative democracy. How do you think beyond the next election? Look at the difference of Russia. Russia has had the same president for quite some time. There's continuity, there's consistency in foreign policy, there's consistency in domestic policy, there's consistency in economic policy. In the United States, it's possible for everything, as we've just recently seen, for everything to just be blown up every 4 years. And so what Trump is trying to do, and I don't say 100% on anything. I'm 99.999% confident this is what he's trying to do. He's trying to finally say, if we don't start thinking long term, and I don't mean 5, 6, 7 years, I mean 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. If we don't start doing that, we're doomed, because other countries have their country first policy. They have an industrial policy that is designed not necessarily to produce, to provision their citizenry with the cheapest goods, but to position the country into the modern world on a long-term basis that promotes industrial production domestically within the United States borders, especially in industries that we have deemed are strategic, important, and essential. So that's what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to basically untangle the yarn of decades of what I consider failed macroeconomic policy that characterizes representative democracies. It just does. Go back in history and look at what kills democracies. It's fraud. It's basically what Doge is trying to fix. It's fraud, waste, inefficiency, and most of all, impotence. I mean, if the barbarians are coming and they're at the gate, you know, the time to debate's kind of over. You need somebody to step forward, and you have to, you need somebody with a personality that is willing and able to do things that, generally speaking, we dislike in a representative democracy. Look at ancient Greece. Look at Rome. Look at how debating societies, or better said, look at how countries that basically turn into just debating societies, nothing ever gets done. The only people that really benefit well are the insiders, the inner party people, that sort of a thing. And that's what causes societies to crumble. I think Trump truly realizes that. And I think this is what he's trying to do. It's no longer 1946. I've been saying this almost my whole career. I mean, even as a young professor, I was like, why do we need NATO? Why do we need this Cold War apparatus when the Cold War is over? Why do we have, if we are no longer the world's hegemon in the sense that we were in 1946, and we ought to be proud that we don't have to be, because we did some good things. Bretton Woods established the modern international monetary order. And as long as we had the boogeyman, I mean, I think maybe our younger viewers don't grasp how much the USSR as the boogeyman drove everything about American policy. We didn't care about fairness in trade as long as they weren't communist. As long as Canada wasn't communist, we didn't care. As long as Japan stayed capitalist, we didn't care. Indonesia, we did a coup, on Sukarno because Suharto was our guy. I mean, the CIA literally, because we viewed Sukarno as someone who was at least communist friendly. And if you really go back and study it, he wasn't. He was just simply saying, perhaps we could have something in between. And one of the most corrupt presidents in the history of politics was Suharto. I mean, his daughter, his kids. I mean, one kid owned the banks, one kid owned the roads. I mean, it was an exercise in capitalist corruption. So I think Trump is genuinely trying to fix that. I think he genuinely hates this Russian-Ukraine war. I think he correctly sees the danger of BRICS should that come to fruition. And by the way, The BRICS nations do not want to do BRICS. We've forced them into it. An international payment mechanism is only useful if you can use the international monetary unit. If you sanction this and sanction that and seize this balance and seize that balance, if you turn your international standard into an American club, it's not surprising that rational international actors don't want to use that anymore. So
Right.
Trump is the first president I have in my lifetime that I have seen that understands we are doing this to ourselves. And if we don't do something different, we're going to get this nightmare scenario that, since you've known me, I've been talking about. The nightmare scenario is something like BRICS, where the US dollar plummets to near nothing. And the BRIC nations don't want to do this because they know the outcome of that. It is literally scorched earth. Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, we suffer greatly, but so does the whole world. I mean, the entire monetary foundation of the world collapses. That's what's at stake. And I think Trump sees that. And I like that about him. Now, if you'll let me to answer.
Go for it. Go for it. I haven't said a word.
I'm going to take my economics hat off now and I put my psychologist hat on. Trump is a trip. Can we agree on that? Is that a fair statement? I don't care if you love him or hate him. That dude is a trip. I've never seen anything like it. Maybe if you go back and study Huey Long or Andrew Jackson or somebody like that, Trump is a trip. He likes to hear himself talk, but he's not stupid. He's playing chess, not checkers. And Trump likes to use, Trump has figured out that the United States is the most desirable market in the world to do business in. And there's power in that. And he says tariff, 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 tariff. And like you said, he's going to tariff penguins. You know, I bet this squirrel out here that I'm looking at right here, right now, I bet he wants to tariff that squirrel just to get the squirrel to change its behavior. And you know what? It seems to be, it's premature to say it's working, but it's kind of working. People forget it's only been what? It's only been a little over 2 months. It's already kind of working. We already have, now pledges are not the same as actual checks written. But we already have some very large pledges. I think it's in the tune of about $3 trillion of new direct foreign investment from overseas. We have people caving all over the place on tariffs. People do not want a trade war. And Trump is doing what I consider 11th hour brinksmanship. Trump is someone that if you're going to play a game of, Trump is one of the last people in the world I want to play a game of chicken with. I would say Trump and Putin have more in common than people understand. Both of those people, if you play a game of chicken with them, you better be prepared to get hurt because neither one of them want to flinch. And in the game theoretic, you know, in the expectations view of that, people understand that Trump is a bluffer, but he is willing and able to go through with the bluff. And so I think most of this tariff thing is short-term positioning to get the United States into the position that he thinks that we need to be in so he can do his domestic engineering and international engineering that he wants to do. Because I think we can all say this is the first president in our lifetime, love him or hate him, that is literally taking the entire international order, turning it upside down, burying it in the dirt, and basically urinating on it and saying, I have no use for this. This is a relic, a dangerous, basically a dangerous sort of anachronism of the past. And we want it. And I want a new world order where America first. And I think he respects people. I'm fairly convinced in this. I think the leaders in the world he respects, and he gets accused of being a dictator lover, and I think that's wrong. I think he loves leaders that put their own country first. I think he likes CEOs that put their company first over social values and things like that. I think that's what he really respects. I think he respects Xi. I think he respects Putin. I think he respects Maderi. I think he respects people that are trying at almost all costs to put their country first. And that's my synopsis of my view of it.
That's your take.
Sure.
I think that this is going to raise costs for
Yes.
everybody else.
Yeah, it will.
I think he wants to get the money that he gets from the tariffs as a massive tax cut that is going to go predominantly to the rich, while people like me end up paying more in the grocery store, or for that matter, just for goods and services in general. I think that the market, because Donald Trump is so all over the place, that the money is going to be on the sidelines as opposed to being in. I think you pointed out yourself that variability or
Expectations.
expectation,
Uncertainty.
shapes everything. Uncertainty, that's what it is. I mean, there's even a thing in the stock market, what is VX or something like that, based on uncertainty. Donald Trump is radical uncertainty. The EU, China, these are organizations that are big enough to tell him to F off. Other smaller countries may be okay where they're chomping at the bit. Canada, for example, is going to bend over. Agreed. Mexico may even bend over. Agreed. But the larger countries that has the ability, China, Japan, South Korea have decided to join together in order to push back on what the United States is doing. They don't accept his premise. I agree with you that what he's trying to do is pull manufacturing back into America, thinking we've lost our industrial base. I agree with you on that. In 4 years, and that's the issue. And you even pointed it out in the thing that you were saying just now. We go, Xi Jinping, Putin, hell, Angela Merkel, these people were there for like 16 years or more, meaning there's a continuity in regard to their policy, economic policy, et cetera, where they can see stuff through. If Xi Jinping is like, well, we want to build a high-speed rail that goes all the way through the country. Okay, he's going to be there from the beginning until the end of that process. That is not the way it works in America. You get Trump, Biden, Trump. You may get another Democrat the next time around, in which case your policy teeter-totters. I mean, Joe Biden's Build Back Better did squat. It was absurd. If you listen to like,
it
did nothing.
It
was
caused
pointless.
a lot of inflation. Yeah.
I mean, the money wasn't even distributed per se, based on the way that Joe Biden had created the legislation. And then you go to Trump, and Trump is going to kill the Build Back Better thing. So that's not going to be an issue of policy. Now Trump comes up with a new world order in regards to the Ukraine war, NATO, maybe. The NATO thing is more dicey. I mean, Mark Rubio said he wasn't necessarily trying to pull out of NATO, even though the 5% thing is not something they could pay. So there may be a bit of deep politics being played in regards to NATO.
Yes.
I agree with you that that's what he's trying to do. I disagree with you that that's what's going to happen.
Well,
I don't.
Well, on that note, notice what I said. There's a short run and a long run. If you if tariffs make things more expensive that are imported, that's a fact. It's not up for debate. I don't care if you're a left-wing economist, a right-wing economist. You're not an economist. You're just somebody on TV that talks. I don't care. Tariffs make things more expensive to the extent that you continue to import them. And the things that will be made the most expensive are the things that in the short run, we have no domestic alternative for. It might be something as simple as a 1 penny screw that we just simply don't make domestically. We can make them domestically, but we can't make them domestically tomorrow. We can make them domestically in 6 months, maybe, and it depends on the industry that we're talking about. But tariffs absolutely will increase prices for whatever that they are levied on, consistent with the price elasticity of demand of that particular good. You know, if it's insulin you're importing, then the consumer will pay 100% of that tariff. If there's lots of close domestic substitutes and consumers can very quickly stop buying Chinese screws and start buying screws made in Oklahoma, then the seller will pay 100% of that tariff if they want to continue to, if they want to continue to do business, in the United States. Right. So there's the short-term thing, and that's why I prefaced what I said with sort of the macroeconomic, or better said, the international political economy Achilles heel, if you will, of a representative democracy. It is fickle, and it's very difficult to keep anything going in a continuous manner. However, Trump is destroying the Bretton Woods arrangement. He's literally destroying it. He's destroying some of the internal institutions of Congress. He's destroying, in many ways, from my perspective at least, the way people look at the Supreme Court. He is an institution buster, but I think in the long run, he's trying. What I think Trump would like to have is to have free trade agreements with all these different countries individually, and do it in a way that we believe helps us, and a good agreement that is lasting. You and I make an agreement. If it's all one-sided for me, you're going to break that agreement sooner or later.
Right.
If it's all one-sided for you, I'm going to break it sooner or later. A good agreement is where people walk away and they compromise, they give something up, somebody else gives something up, and you have a viable, and because of the agreement, there is a positive sum game. The sum of the wealth is more than the sum of its parts. There's a synergy in there. And so I support what he's doing if I, to the extent that I perceive what he is doing. And I think he will be successful, because one thing that I've learned, and this, I don't know if you remember back when you first met me, there was nobody more anti-Trump than me. Nobody.
Right.
Nobody. I mean, and I haven't gone full MAGA, but I am, relative to what we had, I'm fat, dumb, and happy. I am exceptionally excited about what's moving forward. Now, my one dislike that I think it's an inconsistency. I like what Trump has looked at the Ukraine-Russia war and said, this is a loser's game. And I think he's basically told Ukraine, do what I want or I'm out of here. Well, if I was President Putin, I would like that. Nobody is going to support a ceasefire if you're winning.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. Now, maybe they would have done maybe a ceasefire would have been done, back in the Biden administration when when the war first started, didn't go their way so much. But if you're winning, nobody wants to do a ceasefire.
No.
I am disappointed in the Middle East policy. I am disappointed because one of the things I liked about Trump relative to the Biden administration is I thought I was getting rid of the warmongering, and maybe I still have, but I do still believe and I'm not anti-Israel. I'm anti-Israel obsessed. I'm anti-Zionism, if you will.
Right.
I have no problem with Jewish folks. I have no problem with Israel existing. I have no problem with any of that. I do have a problem with my nation saying, no matter what they do, no matter what the cost, we stand with these people. That's not America first. It's an inconsistency in the Trump administration. And that's a fact. You may like the inconsistency because we all have little inconsistencies. We make exceptions to our general rule, but I demand people acknowledge that it is an exception and it is inconsistent.
Let me ask you this, Mark. Do you really think that industries are going to take the hit necessary to bring industries back into the United States with a president that is going to be gone in 3 to 4 years?
Yes, and let me tell you why. But not yes as in 99% sure. Yes as in 75% sure. Okay,
Fair enough.
Because anyone that gives you metaphysical certain forecasts is a charlatan. Just don't have them on your show. Get rid of them. Those people need to be on MSNBC and Fox and all that. They're sure. They're not even real economists. They're talking heads. Maybe they have an economics degree, but they don't do real economic work. They don't get in spreadsheets and spend days forecasting, analyzing, adding, subtracting, projecting, and all that sort of a thing. The initial signs that Trump's strategy is working is, now it could just be pomp and ceremony. I admit that, but I don't think it is. We have a huge number of official announcements from international corporations that have committed, the last time I checked about a week ago, was about $3.4 trillion of new direct foreign investment.
Just to be clear, though, that was before his tariff war.
Well, they knew it was coming. They knew it was coming. And I still don't consider this a tariff war. A tariff war, hold on. This is a tariff battle. This is
Come on.
No. Hold on. Hear me out. This is tariff saber rattling. This is Trump positioning himself and the country to what I believe he thinks is going to get him what he wants. Trump isn't stupid. Nobody wants a real tariff war unless there's no other choice. Now, what makes Trump dangerous is when he plays chicken, he actually will push the button before the other person. He won't turn, is what I'm saying. So you have two cars going at each other. Trump isn't going to turn, and his secret weapon is most people will veer. Most people will turn away from the head-on collision, and they know Trump won't, and that's how you win games of chicken.
China's not.
So, well, actually, they already are. She just got through giving an interview, and he talked about that BRICS is a last unit. They don't want a tariff war with China. And if you notice, the largest criticism of Trump is that, yeah, this is all announcements. Again, this is the saber rattling and the cold tariff war that everybody wants to avoid that. So, but if you look at who Trump has been the nicest to in terms of his tariffs, because if you really want to hurt China with tariffs, 20% doesn't do anything. You need a 200% tariff because, to really make that have teeth. Trump has actually been friendlier to China than he has been to Canada, than he has been to the UK. He has been, and I believe, and you can have me on. If I'm wrong, you can have me on, and I will eat crow publicly. I'll publicly announce that I'm wrong. And then, but if I'm right, you can have me on, and I'm gonna, ham it up a little bit and, pat myself on the back somewhat with that. But I do believe that that the initial signs, and it's premature, but the initial signs are direct foreign investment is coming. Even though they know Trump won't be president again, the Democrats are the dumbest. The modern Democrats are the dumbest. I don't claim to be some grand political analyst, but these are stupid people that run the Democratic Party. I see no one that I think the Democratic Party, unless something huge happens, is almost done at least for the extended future. So the next president is probably, I would not be surprised if 2028 is Vance Gabbard. I would not be surprised in that at all. So even though Trump may not be president, Trump has destroyed the Republican Party. Or let me say it differently. He's destroyed the conservative nature of the Republican Party, because the whole nature of conservatives is they want tomorrow to be a strong function of what yesterday was. That's what a conservative is. Let's not have a whole lot of change. That's why progressives freak conservatives out so much, because they want these grand, changes in society that will create more justice and create more equity and more fairness and all that. And the conservatives are like, oh, we can't have that. We want tomorrow to be like yesterday. We don't, we want our house values to stay the same. We want certainty. That's the conservative, both political and economic foundation.
Right.
So given the increase in direct foreign investment, given the fact that just about everybody has backed down on the tariffs, even though publicly they're going to rattle their sabers to back down, I believe Trump is going to back down and give people an opportunity to have face. And Canada is going to drop the symbolic, whatever it is, the high dairy tariff. I find a lot of this to be hypocritical, because we have used tariffs to protect our farmers since I've studied economics. You know,
I know, but give me your take. How is this different than the Smith-Hartley Act?
What's different is Trump's doing it. Let's be honest. Put yourself in the position of any foreign leader. Joe Biden comes to you and says, I demand you do X, Y, Z. Be honest.
Yeah, you don't care.
What are you going to do?
Biden.
No, you're going to laugh. You're gonna be
Right. Yeah, you don't care if Joe Biden is asking you
You're
to do
going to laugh.
anything.
You're going to just be like, okay, dude. Yeah, keep talking. Yeah. You know, you get your popcorn out. Now, when Trump says this, again, you don't have to like him. You can hate him. But if you're an objective person that can think things that you don't like and don't agree with, Trump is a different kind of person.
I know, but it depends on what it is, Mark. Like, if I'm China, I'm not accepting this. I am big enough that, look, the amount of trade that goes between the US and China is only 2% of China's GDP. They don't care. They may want to trade with America, but they can do without us. And I get the sense, I was reading some of the reports that pointed out that the dollar itself became more dodgy because of what Trump is doing with this. Meaning you already had the dollar go from 70% of the world reserve currency, like 50-something%. And their point was, this makes that even more dubious, that what Trump is doing is sticking his neck out. This is a risk for the U.S. economy, not just the world economy.
I dispute those numbers, by the way. I don't know where you got that source, but that's not what I would.
You don't buy it?
State no.
That the world reserve currency, that the U.S. dollar is like 58%.
No, what I'm saying is it has not dropped to 50%. In fact, it's
no. I didn't say 50.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
Last I saw it was like 58%. But
well, that depends on how you compute it, whether you're using gross domestic product, whether you're using gross national product. But if you look at it in the terms of weighted contracts by dollar denomination as a percentage of non-dollar denominations, it's actually increased. And it's increased because the United States looks like it's becoming less combative and hold on. It is becoming less combative. Trump clearly has a different worldview than the Democrats did during the Joe Biden administration. He clearly has a different worldview than the Republicans, than any Republican in my lifetime has had. And the American First agenda, which has its warts, but the American First agenda absolutely is predicated on let's stay out of foreign wars. That stupid signal thing that what's his name, invited the journalist on. That made it clear. There's debate within, Vance and Tulsi. They were clearly saying this isn't really MAGA. This is not really America First. We're entangling ourselves in foreign wars and things, and if we want to remain the economic powerhouse that we are, we have to play nice with the rest of the world. In order to play nice with the rest of the world, we have to destroy the habits that we've got ourselves into and that we've got our friends into. And as
they turn around and bomb Yemen, and is now threatening Iran.
Well, I agree, and I'm not in favor of that, but it's a threat, and we will have to see. But what I'm arguing is what I suspect, what I strongly believe based on my experience is true, and that Trump is mostly saber rattling. He does not want to get into a war with Iran, but if he wants to win the midterms, he can't completely divorce himself from the Jewish lobby and the Jewish voice, which would love to see us just put Iran into the Stone Age. That, I think, I don't know anyone to deny that. I think that's a fairly true statement.
So it's the Israel First administration, not America First.
Yes. Now, China. So let's talk about China. China's banking system, if it was Western standards, is on the verge of collapse. Almost every bank they have is insolvent. Their internal domestic problems, from unemployment to deflation to all sorts of things, is causing a lot of social unrest. They've still pegged their currency to the dollar. And during the Biden administration, when we printed money like printing presses were going out of style, they were forced to print money. And they didn't need to print money because their economy was already overheated. Then they printed money. Then I think you had me on about 5 years ago, and I said China's about to do a controlled burn. They're going to forcibly put their economy into a recession so that they don't have a depression. That's exactly what they did, and it stopped the crumbling of what they have. But China has a lot of problems, and China understands that they do not want to get into a economic war with the United States. Trump could, if he wanted to, completely destroy their economy by just, hold on, he could do it with an executive order. Now, it would seriously harm our own economy, but all he would have to do is just take most favored nation away from them. That would take them out of the banking system. That would take them out of the International Monetary Fund. It would take them out of most of the world's financial. It would turn them into Russia. Now, Russia, one of the magnificent things about Russia, you had me on the day of the sanctions, that when Biden put the sanctions on them. And if you remember what I did, I bought rubles. I bet the farm.
Right. Right.
I lost money for a week. And then I quadrupled my money. And I told people, this is unsustainable. It's not going to happen. And I sold half of it. I still have the other half. And if you go look, ruble's doing good.
Mark, I'm gonna have to I have another
always
guest
fun, man. Always fun.
I'm gonna leave it on that. Now I gotta be honest. I don't know if that's true about the Chinese economy.
Sorry.
I would have somebody on. I don't know enough about the Chinese economy to debate one way or the other on it. So I'm gonna leave your comment the way your comment is. You're right. You did buy rubles. You did make a ton of money on rubles. I remember when that first took place. I wish I would have followed you and bought those rubles. Right with you, Mark. I always appreciate having you on, man.
Always
really
a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you for this. Mark Frost, economist.
Best show on YouTube.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Economist,
All right,
professor, consultant, drummer, Eagle Scout, Marine, capitalist, Schuppetenarian. And you can follow Mark on Twitter at FrostTheCash. I always appreciate you, man. Whether I agree with you or not, I always appreciate these conversations. You be safe, Mark. Have a good one.
All right, man. You have a great one.
Thank you. All right. I would like to bring on my next guest another person I am always enamored to talk to, Kofi Kawaku. He's an African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies in the University of Johannesburg. Kofi, my man, how you doing today?
Yes,
you doing all right?
I'm doing right. Gosh, you would have let me talk to Dr. Frost there. I would have taken on China there.
Oh, you wanted to have a go at him?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's an American economist. You know, they have a certain view of China. I'm greatly doubtful of what Mark said.
I'm glad you put it out there because it's just, I mean, the evidence doesn't show much of what he's saying.
Yeah,
you know, even the Economist magazine that still calls itself the Journal, for the past 30 or some 20, 30 years, they've been talking about China, the fall of China. China is going to be, you know, fragmented, and nothing has happened so far.
Yeah,
and the evidence is still showing
Russia's running out of weapons. Russia's fighting with shovels. It's like they just say that all the time, right? Oh, the Russian economy is going to collapse. Russia's like fourth in the world.
I had this conversation with some guy from the Washington think tank once on a sort of Dubai TV station. My goodness, I know on CGTN once, I think 2 years ago. He almost, you know, bit my head because I said that the Russian economy was strong. And I had to quote him from the World Bank data, but he still didn't believe it. And he was coming out with his own data. And I said, my goodness.
Yeah.
You know?
And I just remember they were like, Russia's running out of missiles. Russia's fighting with shovels, right?
Yeah.
Russia's taking, what is that, chips out of washing machines. Like they were saying all of this stuff.
That's right.
And it's like, where are you getting this from? Like, it's like, they just make this stuff up. No, Mark is a good friend of the show. I definitely appreciate him for coming on.
It's always good to have different views on the show.
Yeah,
It's excellent.
absolutely. This is not an echo chamber. Whether I agree with the
Yeah.
person or disagree with the person, like I have one to talk to. I wanted to talk to him about the tariff thing though, because like I said, I thought him and I were going to have a very different point of view on the tariff issue. We'll see. I mean, look, if the U.S. was one of those countries that we had a leader for 16 years, okay, maybe because I was listening to this guy who was talking about parts and how there were machine type parts that you just couldn't get in America, that you couldn't get it made, couldn't get it built, that many of the industries in America just can't necessarily create. I think to Mark's point, well, we want those industries back in America. And if you had a period of time where you could basically inflict pain on the American public and American businesses where they are forced to bring those industries back, then you're better off for the long term.
Yeah.
We don't have that political system. Like we flip back and forth. And the policies.
But even, Jamal, even if you did, it would take a little more than the term of President Trump to come over. It's going to take a bit of time because America doesn't have the speed of execution as China and Russia. This is the thing that very few people are talking about, that sort of centralized focus on direct order, disciplined, and get things done. You always have little things, environmental laws, people that are come in. Look at the legal system, how long it takes to get to a judgment, for example, unless it's political. So that's going to be it's going to take time for all this to.
Build Back Better plan is a really good example. Like in order for it was like you had to send it to the state, then the state had to come up with their own idea, and then there was somebody who came in and criticized what the state was doing, and then the state has to come up with a new proposal. And then the federal government got there. I mean, nothing got accomplished. Like they couldn't even build like an electrical station. It was ridiculous. Just absurd.
And it's still hovering somewhere there. It hasn't really moved. They're trying to move. They're trying to get the Europeans to buy into it. The Europeans probably will say, "Yeah, let's do it," but nothing is moving.
Yeah, Kofi, I want you on for one the tariffs on South Africa. We should talk about. Because apparently that number, where is that number? I have that sheet somewhere. Here we are.
30%.
30%.
Yeah.
30%. And the way apparently that they came up with the number is
The
that
formula.
So the formula ended up being, it says they didn't calculate trade barriers. Instead, every country, they took the trade deficit with the country and divided it by the exports to the United States.
From that country, yes. So in South Africa, I think the trade deficit was 8.8 billion, and then the export to the US was 14.7. So when you did the division, it comes down to something like 0.59 something. So round it up to 60. So roughly 60%, right?
That is.
Then what people are asking themselves is, how in the world did they come up to divide it in two and split it in two and give 30% to South Africa? What was the rationale that informed that division to half of 60%? And so it's really strange in how this thing came about. But it's having some really nice debate here down in South Africa.
Well, that's what I want to get into. What is the debate in South Africa? But look, from my premise, I think many of these countries are going to tell Trump to F off.
Yeah.
I don't think they want a trade war, but I don't think that China, I don't think the European Union, like countries of this scale, are going to, and then the European Union is not a country, it's a collection of countries. But you get my point. I don't think that these countries are going to, one, I don't think they like Trump. Two, I think they have some feelings about Trump ending the world order in the way that it has been. The United States has been a main proponent of globalism across the globe. Like that's been out. We are the capitalist country. This is the thing that we believe in. And then Trump comes in and says, you know what? Globalism sucks. It's not doing it for us. We need to change it. Now, he may not be wrong, but the way he is doing this is so boisterous and so in the face, where it's like, yeah, we're going to just have a trade war against the world. And if the world says F off, then what? What is the debate taking place in South Africa? And I want to put this in the context of BRICS, because South Africa is not necessarily alone anymore. South Africa has other trading partners that it's working with: Brazil, India, China. Russia, etc. Indonesia being another one of those countries. What is the conversation in South Africa? How are you guys dealing with it?
People are, they're not just stunned, but they're now becoming numb because they know there's this feeling, this wave of negativity coming from Washington. It's not about the United States per se or the citizens, but from a new government that seems not to be well educated about what's happening in South Africa. Again, I mean, if I'm sure you listened to President Trump singled out South Africa. It said things are still bad there. You know, they're doing something terrible. I didn't quote him exactly, but he left the impression that still things are terrible. Well, there are terrible things around the world, same as here, of course. I mean, we can't deny this. We're going through a terrible electricity drought, outages, and sometimes water issues.
Sorry to interrupt, Kofi, but that's not what Trump means. Trump means that you guys are apparently killing white folks. Stealing your property.
I was coming to that point. His focus is on more on the minority white people than everybody else. He has yet to even say anything good about South Africa since he came to power. Well, in his first term, he didn't say anything better about Africa, ranging from that shift whole comment he made to now with a very specific focus on South Africa. So the way this whole thing's going is that, first of all, I think South Africans more and more understanding that it's Trump against the world and that there's a global tariff war that is launching and kickstarting. That's going to lead to a huge trade war. And out of this big blob global issue, South Africa is now being focused and then singled out, and fairly, especially because Trump is not having that education about the country. And even if you were to ask President Trump, what's the size of South Africa? What is the population of South Africa? And in fact, if you were to ask him what's the population of the white people he's supporting here, he wouldn't be able to even tell you. Well, I'm pushing it a bit, but that is something people are saying. Trump doesn't know much about South Africa. And there's speculation that he may not even come to the G20 summit in November, which summit is going to lead to passing the baton to the United States to deal with the next G20 in 2026, which will be a shame because he might send his vice president, J.D. Vance, or some kind of low-level secretary of commerce or something, Vance. And that's going to be something like that. But for the 30%, as we just spoke about the formula, I mean, the whole world thinks the formula is really rigged. I mean, I'm sure you've heard James Sirowicki, the famous journalist who used to write for I think he used to write for the New Yorker on economic issues. He just flagged this out and became really important. People are now paying attention. How did you get to that formula? And then for South Africa, from that 60% to 30%, but even 30% is very high. And so South Africans not only are puzzled, but they're worried about the consequences. Economic consequences, you and I have discussed it. AGOA is involved in it. The Africa Opportunity, Act, very complicated program, but very interesting for Africans. Although there were 30 African countries that were eligible, only 10 were benefiting from it. But even 10, that's still a lot of money. And so there are 100,000 people who will be affected if in September, I think it ends in September, it comes up for renewal in September, I think the 30th, 2025, this year. So if South Africa is out of it, it's going to be a tough one economically for people who've been benefiting from it for a while. And then it might also have a sort of reputational impact on South Africa in the sense that if South Africa can't do business with a good, big capitalist country, who can trust it? But I doubt this because most countries are now under US attack. And that is giving a little bit of coverage to South Africa. But it's not enough because the consequences will be dire. Economically, politically already, as you know, there are 2 congressmen who are already filing an act to review the relationship between South Africa and the United States. Let's say the United States and South Africa. It's been going on since the Joe Biden's administration. So it's nothing new, but they're pushing it very hard. But the subtext, we already know it. Even this new sort of act is at the end of it, slightly putting the ICJ, South Africa ICJ genocide case against Israel. So that's the subtext that we're reading all and on and on. Although people don't want to talk about it, but this is the main point, because South Africa hasn't done anything else to the United States. South Africa hasn't attacked the United States, but the case of Israel becomes a very important one. And then I think politically as well, it's going to have some impact, because some opposition parties really love the United States. And it seems like the US has got some asset here and minions that are really rooting for it. So it doesn't matter whatever the US does, these political parties will always preach the US narrative. And it's
Even
not easy.
after this. I mean, like,
Yes.
Trump is
Yes.
effectively trying to destroy the South African economy.
Yes,
with
yes.
these tariffs.
Some of them will. Although there are a few of them that are recognizing publicly that, look, President Trump is misinformed and so forth, but still, that whiteness seems to be connecting with them, and they love somebody helping them and playing and supporting them. I think it is something we want to dismiss, but after a while, I started to say, wait a minute, I can't keep dismissing this. There must be something there. That's really the oiling parts that's connecting these people. And I think this is where we are. And South Africans, I mean, they woke up again. Today, since Trump announced this thing, the Liberation Day, we're hoping it's really going to liberate the United States. But we're hearing a lot of bad news already in London. Apparently, there are about 2 trillion pounds that are getting off somewhere, where people are losing money because they're not trusting the United States anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, so
So
seriously.
wow. Look, I agree with you that the Israel thing plays a big role in the South Africa going at, basically South Africa putting their warrant, or let's say making the papers for the ICJ, and for the ICJ to basically agree with what South Africa is saying Israel needs to unravel these open air ghettos and these basically their colonial holdings. Agreed. And the US effectively being an Israel first country, I mean, call it what it is. I think even Mark would agree with that, considering what they're doing in Yemen and what they're threatening Iran, neither of which are threatening the United States. I mean, hell, even in that signal leak, JD Vance was like, only 3% of US shipping goes through the Red Sea. Why do we care? Why is this our issue? Well, it's our issue because Israel wants it to be our issue. And so I don't doubt in the least that part of this, they're killing white people and stealing their land, and this attack, this relentless, continuous, random attacks on South Africa has everything to do with that ICJ warrant, as opposed to anything South Africa did in and of itself. What is South Africa going to do about this? Like, what is, like, for example, do you know if the BRICS nations have had a conversation? I mean, I know this just came out last night, but I would imagine that the BRICS nations will come together and come up with a cohesive strategy as opposed to individual nations, kind of like China, South Korea, and Japan saying, okay, we're going to work together to figure out what we're going to do, as opposed to being individual actors being picked off. Is South Africa looking to its BRICS associates, or is it looking to deal with this on its own?
This is an excellent question that many of us have been asking ourselves, and a lot of people also asking themselves, what's next? Right. Because we know this is the beginning. After 2 or 3 months, I think Trump has been in power now for 60 or something, since January and March. That's roughly close, going towards 100 days or so. And with the sort of snowball attack on South Africa, people are saying, you need to rethink this relationship. Of course, there are people who are still, they're having the diplomatic hat on. Well, we're working around with the United States. The regular diplomatic nonsense that sometimes really gets you also in trouble, because the more you talk softly without a strong stick in your hands, which South Africa doesn't have, the more you get into, you're going to have to cow down to whatever the US is going to say. We're hoping we're not going to see that, but it is sure that South Africa is going to be bullied. But people are also worried about the lack of a visible South African strategy. That's first for South Africa. A visible strategy to really face up to what is coming, what is already there and what is coming, how South Africa is going to be able to face up to that and get out of it, or find ways to strengthen its not only political diplomatic situation, geo-economic situation, but also seriously internal issues to sort out in South Africa. Because economically, South Africa is not growing at all, so it's not a good sign. So somebody can use that as a vulnerability to continuously attack South Africa. That's one. And the fragmentation, the racial fragmentation between white and blacks is starting to fess out a little bit with time. If the US attacks us really strongly enough, it's going to start growing because we can see it. I mean, these are not easy issues. In the US, it's almost the same. As soon as there's a little racial, rift, it's easier to grow it very quickly. But South Africa we haven't seen, at least publicly, a strategy, but it's coming. It's becoming more and more an imperative to say South Africa must develop a strategy to really face up to what's coming to it from the United States. Because the US has had a US strategy before under the Joe Biden with Anthony Blinken, who launched it in July 2022 with great fanfare here in Pretoria, but it didn't go anywhere. And I think President Trump will probably put his people together. And as you probably know already, he has a new special envoy for Africa, a Lebanese American-born Masad Boulos, who incidentally seemed to have done some stint in Africa, especially in Nigeria, where he was running a big company, a logistics company. He studied, in fact, in the US, in Texas, and so forth. And his wife was born in, I think, in Nigeria, somewhere there, something like that. But in any case, in Burkina Faso. Sorry, in Burkina Faso. So very interesting. So he has a sort of way in Africa. But hopefully that new Africa strategy, if it is going to come out, I hope it does, must be coherent enough. But Boulos, this special envoy, has already visited the Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC. He's also going to go to, I think, Kenya and about Rwanda as well. And as you know, the US got some serious interest there. Well,
Yes.
you and I, we'll talk a little bit about that later. But key to it is, to answer your question, is that South Africa hasn't yet, at least opening, talked about a BRICS strategy. But I'm sure they are talking to each other. South Africa is probably talking to Russia, but the BRICS haven't been strong enough as a collective team because of some of the weak links. South Africa, India is sort of very much all over the place at times. I mean, India is buying arms from Russia, but yet selling arms to Europeans to attack Russia and Ukraine. Some confusion somewhere there. In any case, there's two strongest, countries in the BRICS. Of course, China and Russia. They're doing extraordinarily well. And then, of course, they're now linking up with Iran. And Iran is also said to have some sort of underground relationship with South Africa. So South Africa is going to have to do something very quickly to strengthen its back, both militarily, because it's very, very weak there, as well as economically. That's also very weak, even socially. So there's so many vulnerabilities for South Africa. Until the only strength that South Africa is going to have and has is the steady rise of not rebellion, but anger, against what the US is doing. And you can hear that in the radios every day, in the mornings, in the afternoon, people are talking about it. I think that's the only thing that South Africa has got, in addition, of course, to the moral strength at the ICJ against Israel. South Africa is still a bit weak and vulnerable. That's what I can say.
Anger is a virtue. Anger can be a virtue. I guess, like in this case, or righteous indignation, maybe I should say, more so than anger. I got to be honest, I'm fascinated by this. Like, nobody expected Trump to do this. Nobody voted for this. And even if I give him the benefit of the doubt in saying that, because I agree with Mark, in this case, that Trump is trying to reshape the global economy to the best interests of America, noticing that globalism is no longer our benefit. But keep in mind, though, like, this is pretty outrageous. When J.D. Vance gave that speech, J.D. Vance pointed out in the speech that he believed that Western countries, when they set up the globalism thing, would always stay on top, almost like in perpetuity, that they would just remain the richest and the most powerful. And that somewhere along the way, countries like China started being able to develop and make the same products and make them with more industrial might behind it. And that Western countries started falling behind. And as an example of that, the US kept saying China was stealing their information, stealing their data, and all this other stuff. Europe recently wanted China to give it help for their technology, basically having the same plan that China did. If you produce your products in the country, you need to show us how to do it, because we don't necessarily want to always be just the producers. We want to also understand the technology and grow our own economies. Europe is now saying the same thing to China, which is pretty astonishing. Like, that's such a turn. Now, when China did it, we said they were stealing intellectual property. Of course, when Europe is trying to do it, it's just an exchange of information.
The other word was overcapacity.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. I guess my thing is,
Europe is now making a soft shift toward China. We've heard this week that Europe is now developing its own strategy, talking to the Chinese and how they can do business again.
well, see, that's the other part of these tariffs. That's why I think it's a risk, because other countries could say, okay, the US is becoming unstable. We don't like Donald Trump. Yes, it's an economy, all things being equal, we will want to trade with. However, we do not want to be put under the thumb of this man-child who is trying to dominate as opposed to actually trade. I mean, Trump is not looking for equal exchange. Trump is looking for advantage. Those are different things. Whereas China is looking for a win-win relationship. If Europe is like, all right, America has become unstable, maybe we need to migrate to somewhere else. Maybe we need to look and put our irons somewhere else. China might be that market. I mean, I could be wrong. Yeah, I could be wrong. I'm just
There's China, there's also Latin America, and there's a big one, Africa. And what the Chinese have been doing is they've been putting the pipes, which mean the infrastructure necessary to develop a market where they can dump their goods. And that's really coming. I mean, remember last year, after all these sanctions that the United States and Europeans put on China, China managed to grow its trade relationship with its BRICS partners by 33%. Jamal, this is huge. So that means, and then it's even more open. If they can do that more and more, I mean, they reduced their engagement, their trade engagement with the United States to, I think, to 15 to 16% or so. And they just want to try doing this. And slowly they'll find markets where they can dump their resources. And we know the prejudices, confirmation bias says that, oh, Africa is not a big market. There's nothing here. I mean, we've heard it for so many decades. They'll probably say the same for Latin America, but these markets are growing. The Asian market is also growing. So there will be some shift where the US will be isolated economically very soon without even noticing it.
Well, Kofi, we will see. I mean, the reality of it is we will see how this turns out within the coming months, whether the markets tank, whether these other actors effectively bend the knee. We'll see if Trump is right in his belief that he could effectively change the world order. I am just super skeptical that he could do this. But Kofi, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Kofi Kawaku, he's an African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg, and a damn good friend of the show. Thank you, Kofi. Be safe, man.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
All right. I would like to go to my next guest, Esteban Carrillo. Esteban, give me 1 second. There we are. I was trying to level up based on my guess, because sometimes it looks weird if one person is way up and the other person's way down. No, you're perfectly fine. You're fine. I can change mine. There's no issue. Esteban Carrillo, he is Ecuadorian journalist currently writing for The Cradle. He was previously with Telesur English. Both of those are fantastic outlets. How you doing, Esteban? You doing okay today?
Hi, Jamarl. Good morning. I'm doing good, and hello to everyone who's joining us today.
Oh man, thank you for joining me. There's a story from The Cradle that I would like to hit right off the bat. I mean, considering you're from The Cradle. So this piqued my interest this morning. The U.S. gives ultimatum to disarm Hezbollah or face war. This is based on the report. I would like to piggyback this with Al-Jilani, the jihadist head chopper in Syria that Turkey, the U.S. helped put into power, effectively going after Hezbollah and apparently intercepting multiple weapon shipments before it was able to get to Hezbollah. This is going to create a civil war, or correct me if I'm wrong.
That's the goal. That is the end goal, indeed. Lebanon had a bloody civil war that lasted for, if I'm not mistaken, more than a decade, between the 70s and the 80s. It's a country where sectarian tensions are very easy to ignite, to flare up. But I think if the last war taught us anything, is that regardless of how Lebanese might see each other, or how the different sects might not really trust the others, they trust Israel even less. They like Israel even less. And I would say at this point, they are realizing that in the United States, we, and by we I mean the people of the world, the people of the global South, we don't have an ally. We have an oppressor. We have an overseer, right? That's the relationship that has been established through decades, and that I would say Donald Trump has made it very transparent, right? Like all pretense is lost at this point, and he's coming at us very clearly. This is what the relationship is supposed to be. So I think in Lebanon, this report in particular is based on information received by Lebanese daily Al Akhbar about the internal pressures that the new Lebanese government is facing, in which, because remember, just a few days ago, Israel bombed the suburbs of Beirut again. They bombed it twice over the past couple of weeks, destroying residential buildings, making, the area that was already not flattened, but a lot of destruction in Dahia, a lot of destruction in this suburb of Beirut, which is a Hezbollah stronghold. Why is it a Hezbollah stronghold? Because this is where the Shiite live. This is where a majority of the Shiite Muslims live, a sect in Lebanon that has been historically forgotten and abandoned until the rise of Hezbollah. So when we see these attacks, we're not really seeing, Israel come at Hezbollah anymore. We're seeing Israel come out at Lebanon, come out at the Shiite, and trying to ignite a civil war. And what it appears to be the case is that the United States has given Israel a green light. And I think, as I said, this report in particular is based on information acquired by diplomatic sources by Al Akhbar. But I think the actions of Israel point that there is a definite U.S. green light for Israel to continue its war, its attacks on Lebanon, because at this point, what are the restraints? What are the red lines? What are there's nothing, right? There's absolutely nothing, because Israel is bombing Lebanon, bombing the capital of Lebanon again, bombing Syria, indiscriminately bombing Syria. This week, dozens upon dozens of airstrikes. Obviously, Gaza, where the situation, genocide has become too soft of a word, I would say. Genocide somehow has become too soft to describe what the Palestinian people in Gaza are living through day in and day out. The West Bank, the same. And then Yemen, right? So this is a war being waged on multiple fronts with the help of the United States. And Lebanon is at the mercy right now of the U.S. Embassy and of the whims of the Israeli occupation, which at this point is occupying several points in the border with Lebanon, and saying pretty openly, we're going to stay here indefinitely. We're not going to go anywhere until Hezbollah is restrained, until the Lebanese. They always give, these little maybes. Maybe we'll end if you guys do this. But we know that they will not. We know that they
Yeah.
will not, because if there's one thing that Israel has proven to be, is agreement incapable. They cannot be held to absolutely any agreement.
No, right. I mean, because look, when Trump came in office, he made the deal with Hamas. People applauded because they thought, oh, Donald Trump was able to get a deal. Israel violated the deal all the way through. Donald Trump didn't say anything.
Almost
about
from
the
day
fact.
one. Almost from day
From
one.
day one.
Mm.
And mind you, the notion that Donald Trump wants a ceasefire with Russia when he's violated every deal that he has effectively signed. I mean, this 30-day ceasefire, again, Donald Trump hasn't done anything in regards to the fact that Ukraine's been continuously violating the ceasefire.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Israel. Donald Trump has done nothing with the fact that they've continually violated the ceasefire. Trump was the one that blew off the JCPOA in the very first place, so now he's trying to threaten Iran in order to get them to negotiate. Negotiate with me or I'm going to punch you in the face. It's like, I'm not negotiating with you under those terms. But
Exactly.
this is what he's continuously doing. And even in the case of that article, they point out that the U.S. effectively said, either you disarm Hezbollah or Israel is going to go on a killing spree. Once again, they've been going on a killing spree anyway, the entire way through.
Exactly.
Yeah, regardless. I mean, do you think that the resistance forces made a mistake by being more passive as opposed to being more aggressive in the very beginning? I mean, it became clear that Israel had no F's to give, that they were going to murder and kill whoever they wanted using October 7th as a justification.
Exactly.
Whereas, as an oddity, Hezbollah, Iran, they were more restrained in the way they dealt with it, almost as if they were afraid of getting involved in it or not wanting to escalate it, missing the fact that Israel had no restraints in regard, meaning the guy's coming to fight you and your response is, okay, hey, dude, I don't want to fight. And he is clearly ready to fight. Like, it just seemed like they are in a weaker position as a result of being an unwillingness to push back with everything that they had in their power, because Israel wasn't stopping. They had no restraints. And they had a superpower that was willing to say, do whatever you want.
Yeah,
Commit
exactly.
genocide.
That was the Biden White House, and now it is the Trump White House, right? The people in the U.S., when they go to the ballots, it's their choice for which candidate is more pro-Israel, right? And I think at this point, there's no more. This is the peak of a pro-Israel and pro-Zionist presidents. Yes, I agree with you entirely. And I think I've said this before when I've joined you in other times, that there was a very profound mistake in strategic terms from the resistance axis, in the acting as if though the enemy was someone you could reason with, was someone you could reach an agreement with, was someone that there's obviously the sense that Hezbollah but mainly Hezbollah, honestly, I would say in this case, because Iran was very hands off until the end, at least, and Yemen, I would say the distance, right? The distance between Yemen and Israel plays a big factor in how much Yemen can actually do. Right. But I would say that Hezbollah in particular, they didn't do what they should have done, which is exactly what you're saying, just come in at full force. Because an opportunity was there at some point. I would say at the beginning. Hell, the opportunity was there on October the 7th, right? When Hamas flies into Israel, catches them with their pants down entirely, embarrasses them, to the point that everything that we're seeing in Gaza happened. It continues to be this knee-jerk reaction to what happened on October 7th, right? And this is why how it's justified in the media by commentators, by politicians, etc., because of how badly they were surprised on October the 7th. And I think on October the 8th, if the goal of the resistance axis was to free Palestine, then that was their chance, right? Yeah. But, this is a complicated topic to broach, because at the same time, what we are saying here is that, the late Hassan Nasrallah, for example, or any of the resistance leaders, by showing their restraint, they're showing their humanity, right? Because Hezbollah at no point targeted civilians in Israel. Even the Hamas attack on October the 7th, despite the propaganda that continues to be spread, most of the deaths that they were caused by the Israeli army. They were caused by the Hannibal Directive. There were Apache helicopters deployed to shoot at everything that moves. It wasn't, there's no proof of Hamas rapes. There's absolutely zero proof that they burned any babies. Yet, in the U.S. Congress, this is a topic that is continuing to be brought up as if it is a fact. So, I don't think, like I said, it's very difficult because I'm not advocating, for all of a sudden the resistance axis to become the monsters that their enemy is. But they should have recognized that Israel was coming at them with everything they had. Because for Israel, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, Israel has treated this like an existential matter from day one. From October 7th, they treated this like this was a do or die situation. And the resistance axis didn't. They treated it like they had the upper hand, which at some point they did until they lost it. And then they treated it as if they could, very incrementally push back against Israel. And at some point, that strategy obviously backfired on them because you have so many factors, Jamarl, so many factors to consider, right? Because on the one hand, Israel, truly all they need to concern themselves about is whether the reservists are going to show up or not, right? That's the peak of their concerns. It's not about getting the captives from Gaza back. I think that's beyond clear at this point. It's not about are we going to run out of weapons because the U.S. is going to continue to make those weapons and send them their way. It's not like are we hurting our economy? Because again, when is Israel going to run out of money, right? If the United States keeps sending them billions upon billions of dollars, their economy is going to be fine in the medium and long term for sure. So the real question is, are we going to have enough manpower to go after all of these targets, which has been, to this day is the question, right? The ultra-Orthodox Jews are refusing to this day to enlist. Only 2% of of all of them that got called up actually enlisted. Right. Remember at one point a few months ago, they were discussing how are we going to refill our forces if the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, are not joining? Well, they managed because they keep calling the reservists, right? The reservist force continues to say, there's these rumors, letters, statements, even op-eds in outlets like Haaretz, in which they talk about the atrocities that they are committing in Gaza and that they essentially are saying, I don't want to do that again, right? I don't want to go back. Yet they are still doing it. Because at the end of the day, that's the only question that matters for Israel. But for the other side, for the resistance axis, there's all of these considerations, right? In Hezbollah in particular, they needed to consider also Lebanon. They needed to consider internally Lebanon with all of its crises and do we want to drag Lebanon into war? The Iraqi militias that were also at one point targeting Israel and U.S. bases daily. Same question, right? We need to be part of this government. We need to be, how much do we want to cut the Iraqi government at the knees? The Yemenis, I would say, are to this day the most willing to put themselves on the line, but that's a completely different conversation because it's a completely different situation with Yemen. And at the end, you have Iran, that to this day we're still waiting for True Promise 3, right?
That ain't coming. Sorry, that's not coming. Look, I agree with you. I agree with everything you just said. I think my issue with it is they're still targeting Iran as we speak, meaning even though Iran have effectively tried to stay out of it, kind of, even though they might have given weapons and everything else, Syria has fallen. So one of the main axes of resistance has fundamentally and entirely collapsed. There's a jihadist who wouldn't fire a bullet in anger at Israel at this point, while Israel is bombing Damascus. You have Hezbollah, who seems to be very weakened after everything that has effectively taken place. You have Gaza that has been fundamentally destroyed, meaning Israel has had no issue, no compunction at all in murdering as many people as they want to, whether they're in Lebanon, whether in Syria, whether they're in Gaza, whether they're in the West Bank, or for that matter, even targeting Iran with the Trump administration that may actually be willing to do that fool's errand of attacking Iran. So it's like, if Israel has had no compunction in doing this, then there's no restraint. And the only restraint that you get, you're not going to get something outside anywhere else. The only restraint is whether or not you have the power to stop them from doing X or Y. There's nobody else to do that. Europe is not getting involved. The US is going to be on the side of Israel. There is no, as Mark would say, Leviathan to prevent them from committing atrocities short of the Arab nations that are willing to stop him from doing it. And up to this point, none of those Arab nations have been willing to get involved. Yeah, they are complaining. I mean, Istanbul right now, I'm fascinated with what's taking place in Syria right now because Turkey and Israel are effectively clashing over elements of Syria, where apparently Israel has launched these bombing strikes that have killed Turkish troops.
Mhm.
Now, Turkey hasn't said anything because the moment that you say something, you have to acknowledge the fact that Israel has murdered your people in Syria. And yet, Erdogan, who went so far as saying Netanyahu's Hitler, was working in coordination with Israel to take
Yes.
elements of Syria. Like, that is fascinating. But I guess my point is, nothing is going to prevent Israel from doing what they're doing. And it seems that now the powers of this resistance have been radically diminished in its capabilities. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong in that. I could be wrong.
No, completely. I think the fall of Syria was, I don't want to say the fall of the axis of resistance, but definitely the biggest blow that it has received.
Yeah.
And it still hasn't gotten up from that. Hezbollah at this point, I would say that we should not expect for them to get involved in anything anytime soon.
Well, that leads to another question. If indeed the government tries to disarm Hezbollah, what happens?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Maybe we will see some sort of civil war. I don't see how the Lebanese army would even achieve something like that. It would have to be Hezbollah willingly giving up their arms. Like, that's the only way, right? And just like Hamas, look at what they, look at Gaza today. Like, today, just find anybody who's listening, find images from Gaza. And consider that Hamas is agreeing to every new proposal that for a ceasefire that we know Israel is going to violate regardless, except for disarmament, because they say disarmament is really like the only true red line. It's because again, this is existential for us. Now we're finally seeing that, and I will see Hezbollah taking a similar stance. And regardless of anything else that happens, that their weapons are their freedom, right? When you're facing an enemy that does this day in and day out, and with absolutely no condemnation, international law, being the biggest joke that there is, that the moment you give up your weapons, the next day they're gonna come for you and they're gonna kill you and they're gonna target you like they have targeted Gaza. Because right now in Gaza, they're not killing Hamas fighters. I mean, for the past year, they haven't killed Hamas fighters. This is just about killing women and children and stopping taking away the future of the Palestinian people. But before we get too much into it, I do want to mention what you were talking about what's happening in Syria, because I do think it's also, I agree with you, it's very, very interesting, but also very telling. It's very telling of how these alliances work, right? Syria falls to an armed coup backed by Turkey mainly, Gulf nations, and Israel as well, right? Because Israel, one of the main.
Did you say Turkey maybe? Oh, Turkey was completely involved.
Turkey was entirely like Turkey. If Turkey, if not for Erdogan, Ahmad al-Shara wouldn't even have his Armani suit today.
Yeah,
much less the presidency of Syria. So the same, for the Gulf nations, for Saudi, for the UAE, that laid the groundwork truly for this to happen. But now Israel, because they see, what's happening in Syria really between Turkey and Israel is a battle of colonizers. It's a battle of colonization, right? Because both countries want Syria for themselves. Turkey, Erdogan, we know he wants, to rebuild the Ottoman Empire, and he's already been making plans. They've been making plans to take over control of at least one, if not more, Syrian air bases, to equip them with air defenses, to train a Syrian air force, but with full of Al Qaeda fighters. So in a few years, you're going to see them, Al Qaeda in the air. I shouldn't laugh at this, but truly, reality has become
it's ridiculous. You're not wrong.
And Israel obviously also wants Syria, greater Israel. Syria is essentially part of their promised land, right? So they see an opportunity in the optics, right? In the optics of what's happening in Syria. And it's truly, wild that Israel really is one of the only, maybe even the only nation outside of those that are, members of the Axis of Resistance and a few allies of like Venezuela or or North Korea, maybe, that are referring to the government in Syria as terrorists. Right? Israel really is the only Western government that is coming out and saying, we don't want to have terrorists on our northern border, the Al-Qaeda government in Syria. And, it's not because they care. When has Al-Qaeda or ISIS, for that matter, attacked Israel? When? It has never happened. Never. Well, actually, one time it happened, and ISIS apologized afterwards. So I don't know what their threat they think it is. Second of all, in the hours after these terrorists took over Syria, Israel bombed it to hell and back. They destroyed every overland military asset that Syria had. It's gone. Yeah. And this week they destroyed even more. Why? Because they see these Turkish movements and they see that Turkey is planning to, put these air defenses and train the army. And they say, whoa, no. You're not taking this land because this is our promised land and we deserve it. So all of a sudden, Israeli officials are saying, oh, we might have a confrontation with Turkey in Syria, which brings up so many questions. First of all, if there is a war between Israel and Syria, Israel and Turkey is a member of NATO. Does that activate Article 5? Are we all of a sudden going to see the EU and the US coming to fight in support of Turkey against Israel? Of course, that's not going to happen, first of all. Second of all, Turkey, like you said, Erdogan comes out, he calls Netanyahu Hitler and, the rebirth of the Nazis and so on and so forth. He took 6 months of the Gaza genocide to implement a trade ban with Turkey. And right after implementing this trade ban, he starts giving waivers to companies so that they can continue doing trade with Israel. And then, more importantly, Turkey has, to this day, continued to allow Azerbaijani oil and gas to flow via its pipelines to Israel. So I do not understand why, if you literally have your hand on the tap and can say, no more oil for you until you stop killing Palestinian women and children, if you care so much about them, obviously, and yet not do it, right? And not only not do it, but now it's like Israel comes out and starts, giving these statements about war with Turkey, and the response from Turkey is so mild, truly so mild, for calling someone a Nazi and Hitler and etc. You would think they would have a bigger response, But to be fair, Turkey's response, even though mild, is still stronger than the response from Syria, from the Syrian government, that is the one that is actually getting attacked.
Well, they're getting bombed relentlessly. I mean, Israel just bombed Damascus. And you would think that Jelani, who's ostensibly the leader of this new Syria, would have feelings about that. But as you point out, hasn't said squat and hasn't fired a bullet in anger. And all of those jihadists that are supposed to represent Islam hasn't done anything about the fact that Israel is effectively stealing more territory.
They're busy killing Alawites, sadly, jamarlt, because those massacres are still going on. They're still happening.
Let me ask you this. I want to move to a different topic. Have you looked into the Qatar files?
A bit. I have read into it a bit.
Okay. So just so the audience would know, apparently Netanyahu, his government, was getting money from Qatar. Mm-hmm. And somehow this money was influencing politics. Now, these are the same people who are effectively giving money to Hamas. Mm-hmm. And so people in Netanyahu's administration, I believe 2 of them, have been jailed and being prosecuted. And the thought is whether or not this is going to also fall to Netanyahu and whether this is going to be the thing that actually puts him in a cage. Can you give, I don't know chapter and verse of this. I've only read kind of around scenes of this, so my understanding of this is very vague. Explain this to us. What is going on with these files, and how is Netanyahu being implicated in this?
Well, why is he implicated is because his 2 closest aides are the people who got arrested. So I don't know. Maybe they were acting on their own, taking money from Qatar. It's become such a big deal for a couple of reasons, right? Because first of all, Netanyahu, we're going to talk about corruption scandals with Netanyahu. How long is your show? Because there's plenty to discuss. So this is just the latest, right? And it truly blows up, I would say, because once this comes out, the information comes out that these aides were taking money from Qatar, from lobbyists essentially. We know that the Gulf states are they spend so much money in lobbying, not just in Israel, in the U.S. Right? In the U.S., I think they're the second biggest lobby after AIPAC, the Gulf states. So not surprising, right? Qatar trying to move the pieces to benefit them in any way, not obviously not to benefit Hamas. Like, let's be honest here. I think this genocide has proven that no Arab leader outside of Yemen gives a crap about the Palestinian people. They do not care. They simply do not care. So this blows out because Netanyahu tries to fire the Shin Bet chief. Remember, the internal intelligence chief a few weeks ago, because he's leading this investigation. So Netanyahu tries to fire him. The Supreme Court denies it. Then he tries to fire the Attorney General. So this whole discussion of what's happening with the Qatar gate, the specifics of it, I'm going to be honest with you, they escape me a bit, because this internal Israeli politics are very I don't want to say complicated, but just confusing. Right? They're a bit confusing, and they're a bit like a lot of like finger pointing for things that that the way they see things, not really like the way that things are actually shaped and formed. So this scandal threatening Netanyahu actually, possibly yes. But then again, Netanyahu has been threatened before, right? Like, this is, like I said, just the latest scandal. Just a few months ago, another aide of his gets arrested for another scandal about manipulating the minutes of the conversations of October the 7th to make it to make it seem like Netanyahu had taken decisions earlier, right? That's what happens. They manipulate the minutes, the times, of these official conversations, and then they find out. The police finds out. They arrest this guy. I think he confessed. I think he said that he was ordered to do it, or he said something. He did say something that implicated Netanyahu. But Netanyahu is like I'm Teflon. Like, everything, nothing sticks. Everything just slides right off me. It happened with the corruption scandals the he came to power this last time, right? All that about him taking gifts in the millions from foreign lobbies, from billionaires, etc. It happened with the judicial overhaul before October 7th, when the Netanyahu was trying to essentially get rid of the Supreme Court of Justice and fold its powers to the Knesset, to the parliament, which is controlled by Netanyahu. Essentially, not even a dictatorship, I would say, like an empire, right? Like he was going to name himself king.
He was trying to avoid criminal charges. I mean, they were prosecuting him for the corruption.
Yes,
and his thought was, if I can take this out of the courts,
exactly.
I will be great.
And now the Qatar gate scandal, which again is about Netanyahu ostensibly via his aides receiving money to further Qatari interest, and allegedly to diminish the Egypt's influence, and kind of work against it, right? Like Qatar paying Israel so that Qatari interests are placed first, because the main negotiators in the ceasefire with Hamas are Qatar and Egypt, right? So this is what's happening now, right? Like, this is still happening. Netanyahu was asked to testify. I think he did testify in front of the judge, but obviously, this man, he's not going to give the game away, and I don't think his aides are going to give the game away either. And is this going to bring him down? I highly doubt it. After everything he has done, and still with the standing he has, not just in Israel, right? Like the current Israeli government, I think to the last poll, it only had about 17% support from the people. But that doesn't mean that they are ready to topple the government, first of all. And second of all, the war in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza, has really become almost a non-factor in Israel for protesters or for activists. So then the question becomes, you were taking money from some Gulf monarchy that is also paying Hamas. What has been happening for almost 10 years at this point?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what is the big concern here? If this government has already been mired in so much corruption for so long, what's going to change today, right? And who's going to step in?
Esteban, Man, you always have my appreciation. I really appreciate this conversation. Esteban Carrillo, he's an Ecuadorian journalist currently writing for the Cradle, previously with Telesur English. Esteban, is there anywhere else that people can find your work?
They can find us obviously on social media. My Twitter handle is right down here. And you can search for us on YouTube, where we have a weekly podcast called the Cradle News Roundup. We would love people to check it out.
Badass. Thank you for this, man. You be safe. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. I have been looking forward to this interview the entire show. I am welcome. I can't get it out. I am joined by Daniel McAdams. He's executive director for the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Daniel, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
Hey, Jamarl, how are you? It's good to be on. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, man, always appreciate having you. I brought you on because I read this article that you wrote right here, and I think it's a big deal. It's named Diego Garcia Smells Like War. And in the article, you point out that the United States has been pulling a huge amount of military power into this particular area. So a significant amount of U.S. military power has been moved to this past week, including B-2 strategic bombers, which have landed on the U.S. military base in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, just over 2,000 miles southeast of Iran. And your point is that it seems like Trump is having a military buildup with the idea of having a war, or at the very least, no, it'll be a war. I mean, the idea that the U.S. will bomb Iran and Iran wouldn't respond is nonsense. That building a huge amount of military power, larger than we've seen, I don't want to say ever, if I remember correctly, but for a very long time, targeting and aimed at Iran. And this is going in line with Donald Trump giving them 2 months in order to negotiate with me or else. Iran is not a threat to the United States. And yet we have all of this force for an unprovoked attack on Iran. This is pretty outrageous. Give me your take on this. Well, what do you think is going on with this? Do you think this is a bluff? Do you think Donald Trump is serious with the ultimatum? Give me your thoughts. And more importantly, why do you think Trump is doing this?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Is it a bluff or not? And that's always the question with Trump. You know, he comes out, and I mentioned it in the article, he comes out very bellicose. He makes all kinds of wild threats. And then 24 hours later, he says something completely different. You know, you remember last weekend, I think it was, when he came out and said, I'm PO'd at Putin. I've had it. I'm fed up. And then less than 24 hours later, he completely said, we've got a great relationship and we're going to talk on the phone. So it's really hard to get a handle on what he's doing. But what we do know is that there's at least 5 B-2 bombers there. There are plenty of the refueling jets. You've got the C-17s there that are bringing lots of equipment within striking range of Diego Garcia. And we know that Trump said, if Iran does not negotiate, if we do not reach a deal, very, very bad things are going to happen to them. So that obviously sounds like a threat. So I think it should be viewed as a threat. The problem is, if he's doing one of his bluffs, there are real world consequences in the world of foreign affairs. I mean, this isn't New York real estate where you probably try to bluff your way into a good deal or something like this. This is the real world. And if Iran senses that an attack is imminent, it will respond, or it may respond. It may not respond, but they will have no way of knowing because these bluffs are being thrown out left and right. So it creates a very uncertain situation, which may be good in real estate, but it's terrible when guns and planes are facing each other.
What do you think the consequences will be for an attack on Iran if Trump? I mean, the problem with bluffs is if you don't go through with it, you lose all legitimacy. And so the very act that it's aired and it's out into the public saying, I am threatening you for a negotiation and I will attack you if you don't do that. And then you put all of this military armaments in striking distance of the country itself. What is the consequences of an attack on Iran?
Well, I think, first of all, I think they're creating a trap for him. I think Trump's advisors, and it's not that I'm exonerating him, you know, he's part of this too, but this is what they did to George W. Bush. They laid a trap that he was stuck in, and he had to act. He had to attack Iraq because the neocons are always great at building these narratives, and they've built the narrative now, and they've sprung a trap for Trump, And you're absolutely right. He will look like a weak person if he's given these tough bluffs and he backs down. And that's the one thing he doesn't like. He hates weak people. This is this is the standard operating procedure for the neocons. Senator Tom Cotton was in the Senate a couple of days ago, and he sounded exactly like I remember it from 02 and 03 when the neocons said, this is going to be a cakewalk. Everyone is complaining that it's going to be such a hard war. It'll be over in a couple of days. And by the way, it will all pay for itself in the oil. All a complete pack of lies. They're packing on the lies again, and nobody's pushing back. You know, it's like we've learned nothing. So as to your question, what will happen if the U.S. attacks Iran? Well, the Russians have already come out very, very strongly, and they said this will be catastrophic. What will be the Russian response? They do have a treaty of sorts. It's not a mutual defense treaty, but it has components of it. As Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst, I think wrote about. Was it him? I think wrote about. Yes, it was him. Yes, wrote about if you really look at the agreement that they had, there's certainly something in there, but it will obviously be devastating for the region. The U.S. economy is already reeling. So if we get into a major war in a country of almost 90 million people, it will be an absolute disaster. It'll make the Iraq debacle look like a walk in the park, a cakewalk. It make it look like a cakewalk.
I mean, Iran is what, 3 times the size of Iraq? And as you pointed out, 90 million people, technologically advanced, especially in regards to missile technology, drone technology. This is like the idea that they wouldn't respond just seems outlandish. And Iran has said, if you attack us, we will get nukes. That was the other thing, right? Like, for one, Israel has nuclear weapons. So it's a bit rich that we're making this argument that Iran can't have a nuclear program. 2, they will hit as they call quisling governments, meaning they will decimate the oil fields that are effectively in East Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc., with the idea of, as their response, not to mention hitting Israel, or for that matter, shutting the Strait of Hormuz, meaning the world's energy markets will be toast in a way that we have not seen in our lifetime. It is astonishing to me that Donald Trump will even be willing to broach this sort of outcome or reality. Like, this would end his presidency.
There are also about 50,000 U.S. troops within range if he does attack. So those 50,000 U.S. American troops is almost the number of Americans killed in all of Vietnam will have targets on their backs. And the neocons don't care about soldiers. They think they're just a bunch of dumb brutes, who have it coming. They hate the military. But Trump shouldn't, and he says that he doesn't. But he'll put a target on their backs. You're going to have massive U.S. losses. The only way, I'm not a military expert. It seems to me the only way you could mitigate this would be by the U.S. going in with a nuclear weapon and taking out every one of Iran's capabilities. And it's hard to fathom the United States government using a nuclear weapon again.
By the way, that's been broached by military people, saying that they would have these quote unquote tactical nukes that they would use in order to destroy Iran's all of their capabilities. Now, I am highly skeptical of this. But what is your take on that? I mean, like you said, it's hard to fathom that. I mean, because this will be an unprovoked nuclear attack on a country that is not threatening us in the least.
Yeah, we would become the worst outlaws of the world than we already are. I mean, we've aligned ourselves with genocidal Israel, and that's the reason that the U.S. is even thinking this. There was an article that came out a few days ago. Basically, it was an unnamed Israeli source saying that Israel views the Trump presidency as the best opportunity it has had and may ever have again to finally take out Iran. That's what they want, and they view Trump as the tool that they can use to do it. So that's the real danger. That's why, with Trump aligning himself so closely with the foreign country, a foreign state of Israel, that's where the danger lies, because the Israelis are going to work with the U.S. neocons, pushing and pushing and pushing until Trump is in such a trap that he can't do anything but attack.
But I don't, you got to explain this to me. Donald Trump only has, 3 years left in his term, 3.5 years, give or take. he can't run for office again. He is 80 something years old, meaning he's going to be dead soon, one way or the other. What are the entanglements? Like, what is the hooks that they have in him to get him to behave this way? I've heard Donald Trump in an interview where he was talking about Netanyahu, and he was effectively saying Netanyahu doesn't want to deal. Whereas he talked to Abbas wants a deal. He said he came across like a grandfather, meaning in an honest moment, 3 a.m. between him and his God, he knows the reality of events on the ground in regards to who actually wants settlement versus who doesn't. And yet he's this flaming Zionist when he gets into office that runs an Israeli first presidency. From your point of view, what are the hooks that are in him in order to provoke this? I mean, even the people that he hired for the job, these people are lunatics. Like some of these people, are waiting for Jesus to return after they build on, what is it, the Rock of Zion or whatever. What do you think the hooks are that they have in him on this?
Well, it's just not just the hooks in him is the problem. I mean, it's a hooks in almost every single member of the U.S. House and the Senate. The Senate took a vote yesterday on the day where Israel bombed a school where children were hiding, trying to get some peace. They bombed the school. If anyone has seen that footage, it is absolutely horrific. On that same day, the Senate took a vote. Bernie Sanders, Jewish member of the Senate, had the courage to introduce a bill to suspend arms sales to Israel in the face of the genocide. Every single Republican senator voted against it, i.e. voted to continue sending weapons to slaughter more school children like this. It's not just the presidency that's captured. It's our entire legislative branch as well. It's a real problem, but Americans are waking up to it now. And it's which is a good thing, I think, but it may be too late.
I wish I could show the footage. I can't show the footage. It is too grisly. I mean, you have people who are like literally dragging burned children out of the rubble.
Children are not Hamas. They're not Hamas.
In their minds, there's no difference. And you're absolutely right. It's completely disgusting. I'm curious on where do you think this goes? I mean, so Axios came out with an article. Iran's response is effectively, we are not negotiating with you under threat. Full stop. 2, we don't trust you. So why would we negotiate with you when we don't trust you? C, you blew off the JCPOA the first time around, a deal that we stuck with a year after you blew it off and wasn't necessarily living up to it. However, we will negotiate through a third party actor. Now, I was talking to Miranda the other day. Miranda was like, well, we've always negotiated with the U.S. and third parties. That's not any different than anything else. Mm. But Trump has come out and saying, okay, well, we're looking at this proposal of negotiating to a third party. Maybe this is the off-ramp that he's looking for in order to say, okay, well, really, I got something out of this as a face-saving mechanism for some kind of back-channel negotiations. I am very skeptical, though, of what Iran would even give in any kind of negotiations, considering Trump blew off the JCPOA the first time around. Do you think there's a deal to be made here?
Well, that's the problem. The U.S. has lost all credibility. That deal was painstakingly discussed and put together. It was approved by Congress. It's hard to imagine these days that something like that could even be approved. It was negotiated down to the finest details, and it was working. It was working very well. And Trump comes in and does his bluff and bluster and rips it up. So why the hell would Iran go back to the table? I mean, would you make it if some guy sold you a car and you got home and it was a piece of junk? Would you go back to the guy again? There's no credibility there, and the same is true on the front with Russia. I mean, we had Minsk 1 and Minsk 2, and now Trump is saying, well, there needs to be a universal ceasefire, and we'll do a couple of other things. There's no credibility left in the U.S. It's no diplomacy. So that's the problem. They've undermined themselves, and they've let themselves nothing on the table except capitulation or war. And that's just what the neocons want, because they know it won't be capitulation.
Yeah. But see, this is both parties. I mean, like, Joe Biden wasn't any better. I mean, in fact, Joe Biden was even worse because any notion of negotiation, any notion of coming to terms, any notion of acknowledgement that they were losing the war, all of that was off the table. And you get Kamala Harris, who's out here now saying, "I told you so," and it's like, "You told us what? You were going to start a third world war." Like, what do you think it is about the U.S.? Do you think it's just power has gotten to the point where it's gotten to the people's heads where they think we are above honesty, we're above ethics, we're above morality, we're above honest negotiation? Like something has fundamentally changed. I mean, it's not like Joe Biden was going to honor any agreements that he made any more than Trump would honor any agreements that he made. I just don't know what's like. Do they believe that credibility no longer matters?
Yeah. Well, the right wing in the U.S. loves to talk about how Trump is defeating the deep state, and that's and they're so happy that there's finally a president defeating the deep state. The deep state's still in charge. The Biden wasn't even president; it was his advisors that were acting as president. And the more we learn about it, the more we understand that there was a cabal of neocons behind him who were literally running everything on foreign policy. The same is true with Trump. I mean, Trump has a cabal of neocons. A lot of them tied back to George W. Bush, and and all these guys. In fact, there was this firing of a few people from the NSC staff. One of them was literally Doug Feith's son, the son of Doug Feith, one of the architects of the Iraq War. His son was in there. So there you go. It's a generational thing. So the deep state is still in charge. They flatter Trump and they make him think that he has some power, but he doesn't. They run things. And so we're in a weird place right now as a country. It's a very schizophrenic time. There's so much gaslighting and there's so much purposeful misinformation and disinformation, and the government and the deep state are actually producing it, and they're convincing the right wingers that it's somehow being defeated. The swamp's being drained. Are you kidding? That's not happening
Yeah.
at all.
What do you make of this?
I think you've frozen up. Jamal? I think the deep state got you.
Daniel, I'm sorry. We lost power. There was the lights, everything else just went off. We lost internet power and everything else. But it is back on. I apologize for that.
I thought the deep state got you.
No, I know, right? No, all of the power just went off in the
That's
part.
crazy.
What do you make of this? This article came out, I believe this was NBC News initially reported this, but Trump team advises against calling Putin until Russia agrees to a ceasefire, NBC News reports. Now, this is after Trump's envoy, or let's say Putin's envoy, comes into the country, has a conversation I don't think they talk about sanction relief. They did talk about opening flights, opening, let's say, U.S. money coming into Russia and businesses to replace European businesses, effectively trying to normalize relationships. And then you get this article coming out the very next day, effectively saying, yeah, by the way, Trump's team doesn't believe he should have a conversation with Putin until they have a ceasefire. Now, this goes back to what we were saying before, this notion of credibility. You have none. And so you're dealing with Russia that doesn't believe anything that's coming out of your mouth. And so you're calling for, we should have a general ceasefire. And as Russia will point out, the Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 agreements were effectively blown off, not just blown off. Angela Merkel said they were built under the understanding they were a lie. And so Putin has been very clear. If you say that you would stop the weapons, stop the intelligence, stop arming Ukraine, then maybe we can have a conversation about a ceasefire. But the notion that we're going to have a ceasefire while we're winning on the battlefield, we are destroying the Ukrainian military, something that we were supposed to be doing. That's our objective was to. Then why would we do that? Why would it be in our interests? So this notion of, okay, no phone call until you get a ceasefire seems to be a nonsense non-starter on its face. And yet the people around Trump are effectively telling him that.
It's like it's the fourth quarter and you're leading 49-0, and the other team says, "Hey guys, why don't we just call it a tie?" I mean, are you kidding? I mean, I mean, I may not be the smartest, person in town, but even to me, when I look at that, it seems like the most insane thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And the problem is that they believe their BS. I mean, we had Cavioli before the House, or I think it was the House yesterday, saying the most outrageously stupid things, contradictory. On the one hand, Russia's lost almost 1 million people. On the other hand, they're stronger than they've ever been. On the one hand, they're taking massive military losses. On the other hand, they're outproducing us by a factor of whatever. Which is it? So that's the problem. But what's interesting about this NBC article is someone's leaking, and I wonder who it is. They're trying to trap Trump. Because is it Waltz? I mean, Waltz was involved in this signal business. That was not an accident. His number got sucked into my phone. Really? Okay, Boomer. I mean, something is going on, and there are a group of people who do not want Trump to make peace with Kellogg. How far are they willing to go? Who knows? Look what happened to Fico in Slovakia. I mean, these people are ruthless people. And so someone is leaking in a way to wrong foot Trump in his efforts to make peace with Russia. And I don't know if he'll ever be able to suss him out, because who knows? It's a pit of vipers. I'm sure it is a pit of vipers around him.
Why do you think Trump just doesn't say, you know what? I'm done. I'm calling it a day. I'm not giving you weapons. I'm not giving you intelligence. I'm done. Like, he has that option. And part of me thinks that the new mineral deal that he's worked with Zelensky, where he's effectively said, all right, we're going to take pretty much everything that you guys have in Ukraine in perpetuity until you pay us back $300 billion plus 4% interest. And we would have controlling interest over oil, gas, anything that comes out of the ground. I mean, like, that deal is rape. Like, I don't know another way to call it. It's almost like he's colonizing Ukraine. They can't accept that deal. And yet that's the deal that he's presented to Zelensky, almost as punishment for Zelensky not accepting the first deal. I guess my thought was, is this a pretext for him to walk?
Well, that would be nice if it were. I mean, the problem is he got himself into this in the first place. There were plenty of people, myself, probably you included, who were thinking, this is your chance. Just, walk, like you said, walk away. This was Biden's war. I'm not Biden. There's a new sheriff in town. I'm not going to play this game. It's simple. You're the winner. You walk away with a victory. But again, he got talking about getting sucked in. He got sucked into this because his pride, his ego. I'm going to be the deal maker. I'll solve it in 24 hours, and it's a shame. It's a real shame. What he needs to do is call some different people as advisors. You can keep the neocons, but you need some real tough pipe hitting guys who can go toe to toe with them, and until he does that, I was careful about that. Until he does that, there's no chance.
Now, see, do you see Witkoff is one of those guys? Because Witkoff is fascinating to me. He went and got somebody who was completely out of the political space as one of his lead negotiators to have those conversations. Witkoff seems like he's no nonsense, very straightforward. I mean, I don't know the guy, so I'm saying this purely just from a distance. But I do think it's wild to me that he didn't go for any political person. He went for somebody who's like in real estate.
You know, to keep with my movie reference, he's like the wolf. He's like Winston Wolf, you know. He rolls into town and fixes stuff.
Yeah.
And he talks to people, you know. It was supposed to be Kellogg, who's a big dope, you know, and then Witkoff rolls in and starts making some deals. And I think that's what happened yesterday. I think you referenced it earlier. You know, they had this meeting in the White House. They're talking brass tacks. Here's what we need to do. You know, and that's the kind of that he can get that deal done. And that's what it seems like to me. I don't know him either, but he seems like someone who's unencumbered by these, you know, political obsessions. So this could be refreshing.
Yeah. Daniel, I loved your article. I love your passion in this. I think you're absolutely right in your take on this stuff. I wish more people in Washington had that take and that point of view. They don't seem to. And people elected Trump with this idea that he was going to be the peacemaker. Judge me by the wars that I end, not the wars that I start. That was what Trump said when he got in office. And all of a sudden, he has opened up hell on Yemen. He's ignored flagrantly the violations to the ceasefire agreement for Israel. He has gone after Iran at this point, meaning I'm gearing up for a war. This is what we got. Daniel McAdams, Executive Director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Daniel, what can people find you, by the way?
RonPaulInstitute.org. We have a daily show, the Ron Paul Liberty Report, which is live at noon Eastern Time on Rumble.
Shout out to you, man. Thank you for this. You're doing God's work. You have a good one.
You too, Jerome. Take care.
Bye-bye. All right. Yeah, the power went down. And you know what's wild about it? I'm sitting here thinking to myself, God damn it. And then after because everything shuts down. Internet shuts down. My computer stays on. Light, I think the light went off. Everything went off. And then it's like, there's a moment, and then it comes back on. And then you're like waiting, chomping at the bit for the internet to restart. Worst come to worst, I'm going to always use my phone for it. Professor Wolf is not going to be joining us. I tried hard. I bugged shit out of his producer. I bugged shit out of Scott Ritter to come back on to have a conversation. I don't think he responded to me. I asked him if he would come over the weekend. He said he has to spend time with his wife over the weekend. I responded, that's sweet. He responded back with it. One second. Okay. He said, unfortunately, he's fully engaged today. So we might be able to get Ritter next week. I am looking forward to a conversation with Ritter. I really am. What is it? Thank God for Ritter to come on. No, James, I actually want to have a conversation with him. Look, I am perfectly okay talking to people that disagree with me. My goal is not an echo chamber. It's not like you're on MSNBC and everybody effectively agrees, even the Republicans. Like you get Michael Steele, and Michael Steele is like, yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying. It's not that. Whether it's Frost, whether it's Ritter, whether it's pretty much anybody else. There are people, whatever you want to think of Mark, he's rational. And he's an honest actor in regards to the way he's expressing something. So it's not like he's hiding the ball with you. Like when he says math is math, he's right. And when he's talking about stuff, even though you're coming from a different side, you can find a level of commonality and agreement, even if you may disagree with various points. Same thing's true for Ritter, right? When he says stuff, he's very strong in what he's saying. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a conversation with him about it. The Iran thing, I think, is fitting around for conversation about it. I think it's fascinating. In fact, I would have loved to have him and Rondi come on the show together to talk about the issue of Iran. Those are conversations we should have. We shouldn't steer away from those conversations. I remember being on Sputnik, and we would have people from NATO come on the show. And that was an odd conversation. Or Benjamin Netanyahu's press guy. Again, an odd conversation. Those conversations are more difficult because, look, Israel doesn't care about what's true or false. They don't care about what's moral or ethical. They care about issues of power. We want to do this, and so we're doing this. And so any conversation you're having with somebody who's coming out of that government is effectively a justification for why they're doing something. And they would say whatever they need to say to get from point A to point B. Oh, they were chopping off babies' heads. They were taking a dump in babies' heads after they chopped them off. They were raping women left and right. They were raping women and shooting people and chopping babies' heads off at the exact same time. They would say whatever they have to say. It's often nonsense. And, you know, for me, when I'm having a conversation, I try to be an honest actor in that conversation, which means you have an honest actor talking to somebody who's being dishonest. So if I'm trying to make the point of, hey, but you understand that unless they have security, why do you deserve security? Meaning, why are you uniquely fitting of security, even though you're committing this genocide? You're not allowing security from somebody else. Why do you want them to recognize your state when you are actively preventing somebody else from having a state? Okay, well, they don't care about that. It's not about honesty, right or wrong. It's not about that stuff. My point is, I'm fine with having those conversations. Lab 66, tariffs are fabricated and trade deficits are unrelated to tariffs. These tariffs are intended to raise revenue to cut taxes for the wealthy, obviously. That's the other part, which is the thing that brought up to Mark. When, in fact, I'm going to find it. So one of, I think it was like CNBC pointed this out, saying, well, Trump is going to do these tariffs. He has to really drop taxes. Well, he's not dropping taxes on me. I might get $2 back. He's dropping taxes on billionaires, millionaires, the rich, the people that effectively dedicated money to the Republican Party. And what is going to happen is he is going to say, well, we've raised $1 trillion in revenue. And now that we've got $1 trillion in revenue, we can now get tax cuts. And who do you think those tax cuts are going to? They're not going to me. They're not going to you. They're going to people with means that have been dedicating a ton of money to the Republican Party. And to make that even worse, what that also means, though, is that the increases that's going to happen as a result of these tariffs, which are effectively taxes that we are going to have to pay on all of these products, we are paying that. That's coming out of our wallet. So the pittance that we may get in the $2 of a tax cut, the $50 that you might get back as a tax cut, is overwhelmed by the money that you have to spend day after day after day just pursuing your own objectives, that you have to pay more. He's raising taxes on us. Meaning, like, so you're absolutely right. You're not wrong in the least. I was looking for the clip where the woman was like, well, we clearly, right here, right here, right here, right here, right here, right here. There's a clip for everything, right? Right here. I knew I could find it. Listen to this.
So that's the message from the White House. Steve, what say you in this moment?
Well, I think it is very disruptive, and the administration admits as much. And this gets to two big things. One is the vice president referred to it. They need massive deregulation. They need to get the Muscovites on steroids in terms of removing barriers to get things done. And the other thing is a huge message to Congress. The GOP needs to really substantially increase this tax cut. Now, they say these tariffs will bring in $600–800 billion of revenue. Use that as an offset for big rates cuts in tax rates, because the economy is going to need real tailwinds. And so what they're considering now is small. And the fact.
So that's the message from the White House. Steve, what say you in this moment?
We need more tax cuts. They must be substantial. We need huge, massive tax cuts. We need to get rid of regulation. All of these regulations gets into the way. Look, I agree with you. Some regulations gets into the way. Depends on what those regulations are, right? Massive tax cuts. Again, those tax cuts are not going to us. They're not coming to us. You might get $50 back. They're not coming to us. Laugh 66. You are infinitely, radically correct. Your assessment is infinitely, radically correct. President Jafar, where are all the peacemaker Trump voters at? That's a good question. That's a good question. Comedian Dave Smith came out and says, if Trump attacks Iran, I am going to apologize for the rest of my life for voting for him. Okay. Okay. That's your apology has nothing to do with the fact that the oil markets tank. Nothing to do at all. Or for that matter, that Iran's response is completely unpredictable in regards to that attack. And they could say, screw it, and just cut loose, considering that you've attacked a sovereign country. Not to mention going after Israel, not to mention going after the oil fields, not to mention destroying the Strait of Hormuz. Meaning, just because they don't have a nuke doesn't mean they can't cause damage equivalent, especially in an economic sense, to having a nuke. And they have also said, look, we have the capability of building a nuke. We just don't do it. If you attack us, all bets are off. This notion that the U.S. will use tactical nukes to hit Iran, I think it's nonsense. If they do, there will be consequences that are going to be political that the U.S. has never faced. The ramifications are just, oh man. Thank you, Jamal, for delivering this information unapologetically with every word. Simply amazing reporting. Wraith, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I try. Trying to do God's work. President Jafar, no one is mentioning how these tariffs would decimate the Caribbean, who have great relations with China and depend heavily on U.S. goods. Oh, that is another good point. So there are some nations, not just in the Caribbean and Africa, that are going to be decimated by these sanctions. I mean, Koffi pointed out South Africa getting hit with a 34% tariff. So any and everything that they sell into the United States now get hit with a 34% tariff. All right, fair enough. Whatever that product is, 34% on top of what you're paying for it. And by the way, the same thing with China. When you go into Walmart and you see all those products that come from China, Walmart is a pipeline of products from China into the United States. Walmart has been able to do that because they can sell that stuff for dirt cheap. What happens now when the price goes up 54% or whatever that number is? Okay, well, the Trump administration will say, well, you should just buy American. That's assuming that the American product is out there that you could get. To make that point clearer, this gentleman gave an honest assessment as a businessman on these tariffs. And he makes this point that he says, look, I believe in buying America. He says, I do my damnedest to always buy American if indeed it's an option. He says, but the reality, right here, he says, the reality of it is that American industry is just not up to snuff to do what they are saying that they want you to do. Right here.
Manufacturing, imports, exports. The Trump tariffs were announced yesterday afternoon. Of course, the stock market peaked today. It also triggered a lot of good discussion, I think, on manufacturing in the United States, and I want to talk about that. I have invested millions of dollars in manufacturing in the United States. I bought two companies. One was a HVAC manufacturer, commercial HVAC equipment, who sourced a significant amount of parts from China. Another one is this company, Total Shield, that manufactures ballistic and explosive shielding, mainly for aerospace and space companies, manufactured all in the United States with all United States suppliers. I've seen both sides of, a developing country's manufacturing and the United States capabilities to manufacture. The first point I want to make is if the idea is that we want to reshore a lot of manufacturing by jacking up tariffs, I don't think it will work largely. And I think even if you were to quadruple the tariffs from whatever was announced yesterday, a lot of those goods are still going to be cheaper to make in other places than the United States. This is coming from a super patriot who's invested millions of dollars, who's lost millions of dollars in my first company in trying to manufacture in the United States. I want to do it, okay? I just want to also be realistic about the challenges associated with that. We have major cost disadvantages in manufacturing from a few different areas. Everyone knows about the labor differential, okay? I don't even need to get into the fact that I can hire an associate engineer in China for $25K a year, and that same person's costs $70,000 in the United States, right? I mean, we know that, right? There's a labor advantage, and labor cost advantage. But there's all these other factors. There's regulatory. I had a friend who wanted to put a metal foundry in an industrial park. They said, no, we're not going to approve the zoning. The local town said, we'd rather have a brewery go in there. A brewery, right? That's not manufacturing, but there's a lot of people that don't want this stuff in their backyard, NIMBYs. The regulatory is slow and expensive and painful. Power availability, cost of power, disadvantage compared to a lot of other countries. But the main thing is the supply chain. And I'm going to give you one example. I took parts to every supplier I could find in the United States and said, can you make this? And they said, no. They would say that geometry looks complicated. We could do simpler geometry. We're not really set up for that. We only do, very large runs of things, and you wouldn't come anywhere close to our minimums. All these different reasons, right? We don't know how to do that. We just don't know how. Then I could fly to Shenzhen, an industrial zone in China, and I could find entire city blocks just dedicated to doing that one process or that one material. Oh, you want copper windings? Let's go to where all the copper factories are. Go from this place to this place to this place on the same street, show them a sample, and they would say, yes, we can make that, and here's a quote. Give me this many days for a sample.
That's a big deal. Like, that's not immediate reshoring into the US. That's not an overnight thing that is going to take place where Trump waves a magic wand and all of a sudden the technological, or for that matter, industrial capability comes back to the United States and just all of a sudden, the world is great. The US has reshored its industries. For one, I don't entirely buy the argument that Donald Trump is looking out for the best interests of America in doing this. I do think he wants to create the tax breaks in the way that the first guest or the first gentleman, Laugh 66, pointed out. They said, if I assume the better angels of Donald Trump, that indeed he wants to bring industry back into the United States, I don't think he's going to be successful in doing it. I don't think those industries are created over the course of 2 years. And as that gentleman eventually points out, that stuff takes place over the course of decades, where countries build their industries in order to do stuff like that. We have deindustrialized over the course of X number of years from the standpoint of globalization. Vance makes his argument extraordinarily well, where he points out, well, we thought we could just manage stuff and we can be the ones who come up with the designs of stuff. Other places make it. We make all the money and they stay in a permanent disadvantage. That is not the way it ultimately happened. And because countries that we thought will always be at the bottom have started to bubble up, we need to come up with a new model of operation, hence Donald Trump trying to rechange and reshift the global order. As Mark pointed out, though, China, Russia, some of these other countries have a consistency in regards to their leadership, which allows a certain economic, political, military, all of these things are coherent over the course of time in a way that is not necessarily true with the United States. So just because Donald Trump is in power now, and he's doing this now, A, it creates a certain amount of uncertainty in regards to what the US policy actually is. B, Mark could be right, that these could be bluffs that could be renegotiated. But the problem is, these bluffs that could be renegotiated. Other countries may not see it that way. Other countries may not want to be knuckle under and dominated in the way that Trump is effectively trying to do. He's not trying to have a fair trade arrangement. He's trying to dominate and get a better arrangement. That is the entire point of him threatening Iran in the way that he is. He's not trying to have a real deal or fair deal with Iran. He wants a dominant deal with Iran. The only reason he hasn't pulled this shit with Russia is because they effectively lost. Russia took their sovereignty at the barrel of a gun. And it pointed out, no, we will take all of Ukraine if we need to take all of Ukraine. No, you can't do shit about it. Are you going to put the U.S. military in the fight for Ukraine? If the answer is no, then the answer becomes no. This is what we want. We're going to fulfill the obligations of the special military operation. Iran hasn't necessarily had that fight at the barrel of a gun, where at the very least it's okay, fair enough. We get it. You're not to be effed around with. If he believes he can take advantage, he will. When Rudd or when Starmer or when Macron came to the White House, or for that matter, when Zelensky came to the White House, look at what he's doing to Zelensky. I mean, as grotesque and annoying as a figure as Zelensky is, Trump is effectively trying to rape him. That doesn't have a better word for it. I mean, the first mineral deal wasn't even a mineral deal. It was a deal for oil, gas, any resources that effectively were coming out of the ground. And Trump was going to effectively take, like 50% of it. The second deal is even worse, with the idea that Ukraine owes America $300 billion. It is a loan that needs to be repaid back in full with 4% interest on top of that loan, with us having control of their resources up until the point where they pay back the loan. Like, this is the person who we're talking about, right? So let's not have this illusion that he's out here looking for a fair deal. He's looking for a deal that is in the best interest of America, not a fair deal. Those things are different. So this is where we are. Tariff war. We will see if Trump gets what he wants out of this. I am highly skeptical that he will. Highly skeptical that he will. Let's see, what is this? A Navy vet. Believe it or not, the pirates were the British Empire. They used false flags to steal ships and their cargo at sea. Yes, that is true, by the way, including stealing Americans. People may not remember this, but the Brits used to take Americans onto their ships to force them into the Navy. It's fucking outrageous. Agreed. JRACBX 27, tariffs are tax on consumers. Yes. All of us will now be paying higher wages or higher amounts for things. And it's not like our incomes are going up. I know Vance is going with this idea that, oh, give it some time and companies will come back into the United States and they'll be paying higher wages because they're in the United States. Okay, I have no evidence of that. I have no evidence of that at all. Press gang. Yes, they were press gang, Martin K. Let's see, who else? Remember Superman movie where they groped him? What? Graped him? Rapunzel? I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. Been great Superman. Martin K, obviously there were white elites who think they're superior, hence our problems, but no one is superior race. We're all the same. We're just people. No more, no less. We're just people. Flawed. Fuck ups. Everything in between. Russia needs to take Odessa for sure. Clarence, see, that's the rub, though. If you look at a map where Odessa is, how do you get to it? Like, keep in mind, they've been killing and dying for 3 years. And the Ukrainian military is getting weaker. That is true. But there is a lot of land to have to go through in order to get to Odessa. Even to get to Kiev, it's a lot of land. It's a lot of wood to chop in order to get those things. If they are forced to do it, they will, by the way. Meaning, look, Mark Sloboda has pointed out, in the very beginning, Mark was against this notion of taking all of Ukraine because the last thing you want are guerrilla wars for the next 10 years if you have to take Western Ukraine. by the same token, it has become clear that that may be the better solution as opposed to leaving this fascist regime that's in Kiev right now that is going to resume this process again in a few months, especially with Europe continuously pushing for this notion of continuing the war. So I don't know. I would tell you, from my point of view, I want this war to end. And for all of Steve Bannon's faults, Steve Bannon on this one is right. Walk the fuck away. Hard. Walk the fuck away. Hard. I will leave it at that. I'm going to say like, share, subscribe. You can support the show through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Cash App. All of those things help supports the content. I appreciate all of you for being here with me and staying with me through the blackout, through everything falling apart. You guys have a phenomenal day. I will see you at the very least Monday morning. Have a good one all and be safe.